July 22nd, 1999. Yosemite National Park 26-year-old naturalist Joey Armstrong was getting ready to head out to visit some friends. Her bags were already packed in the pickup truck, but the vehicle never left the driveway. The next day, police surrounded her cabin. Broken glasses were scattered on the ground, tire tracks cut through the dirt, a red mechanic's cap had been left behind. Search teams combed through the forest along Crane Creek until Dr. Desmond Kidd noticed signs of a struggle hidden in the grass. Crushed ferns, broken trees, marks showing someone had tried to run. And then they found the body. When he stepped closer, he was completely frozen in shock. "We've got an 1144. She's been decapitated." The news spread through Yosemite National Park almost instantly, and panic followed right behind it. Just a few months earlier, 3 female tourists had already disappeared there. They were later found dead after one of the largest search operations in the park's history. At the time, the FBI said the main suspects were already behind bars. But now another murder had happened, and people started realizing something terrifying. Maybe the real killer had been walking free the entire time. No one had any idea that the investigation would soon lead detectives to a quiet motel worker who had actually been helping FBI agents search for evidence, and whose family was already known across America because of one of the most horrifying child abduction cases the country had ever seen. Yosemite National Park is one of the most breathtaking natural destinations in America. Every year, millions of people travel there, chasing peace, adventure, and the beauty of untouched wilderness. The park feels timeless, safe, almost unreal. But beneath those postcard-perfect views, there's a much darker reality. The wilderness can be incredibly isolated. Trails disappear fast, and help is often miles away. On July 22nd, 1999, 36-year-old Dr. Desmond Kidd was serving as the medical director at Yosemite National Park. He had just finished a brutal 24-hour shift at the park clinic and returned home completely exhausted, ready to finally get some rest. Then suddenly, his pager went off. He was being called in to assist with the search for a missing woman, and the dispatcher warned him the case might involve a crime. During his 2.5 years working in the national park, Dr. Kidd had helped rescue plenty of lost visitors. But before he headed out to the small community of Foresta, he was told this search was going to be very different. 26-year-old naturalist Joey Armstrong was supposed to spend the weekend visiting friends, but when she never showed up, they immediately feared something terrible had happened. For the past year, Joey had been living in one of the park cabins with her boyfriend and another roommate. Now that cabin was surrounded by police tape. Her white pickup truck was still parked in the driveway, her bags already packed for the trip, and investigators found clear signs that something sinister had taken place. Tire tracks, broken sunglasses, and a red mechanic's cap left behind at the scene. The search team decided to start nearby, splitting into 5 groups to cover more of the surrounding area. Dr. Kidd and 4 others headed into the woods along Crane Creek, searching for any trace of Joey. Before long, they started noticing signs of a struggle. Fresh shoe prints, flattened ferns and grass. Young trees snapped in half. Everything pointed to someone trying desperately to escape. In a narrow ditch, filled with about 3 feet of stagnant water, Dr. Kidd noticed a keychain glinting in the sunlight. Then a little farther ahead, he saw something far worse. The body of a woman wearing a white t-shirt and blue jeans. When he moved closer, he noticed a horrifying detail that instantly froze him in place and made him feel sick to his stomach. "Oh my God, Jesus," he whispered before rushing back to the senior ranger. "We've got an 1144, he said, using the code for a dead body. Then he added, "He's been decapitated." December 4th, 1972, Merced's 7-year-old Stephen Stainer was walking home from school along Yosemite Parkway when a man approached him. He seemed friendly and told Stephen he wanted to speak with his mother about making a donation to a church. The man then led Stephen to a car where 40-year-old drifter Kenneth Eugene Parnell was waiting inside. The man was one of Parnell's associates, someone later described in reports as a slow-witted recruit who had been talked into helping kidnap a child. Stephen got into the car and Parnell drove away. A short time later, he stopped at a payphone. When he came back to the vehicle, he told Stephen that his parents did not want him anymore and that he would now be living with him. And from that moment on, Stephen Stainer disappeared.
They insist he couldn't have seemed more normal.
I've never even seen the man violent at all. He's never even really raised his voice, even when we're just sitting there talking.
He always made us feel pretty much like we had nothing to worry about. never made us feel uncomfortable.
When he never came home, an alarm was raised, and soon the entire city of Merced was out searching for little Stephen. His disappearance completely consumed his parents, Kay and Delbert, who threw everything they had into a desperate search for their son. They handed out flyers, put up billboards, and even reached out to psychics for help. Kay, crushed under the weight of her son's absence, became cold and distant, rarely showing any warmth or affection. Delbert, who openly suffered from the loss, was also barely holding it together. Stephen's room was left exactly as it was. Nobody was allowed to go in. Living in that shadow of grief and fading hope, alongside the couple's other children, was Stephen's older brother Carrie, who was only 11 years old at the time and was devastated by his little brother's abduction. Sometimes he would come across his father quietly going through Stephen's clothes, crying. And it wasn't just the family that changed after Stephen was taken, the whole community changed too. Parents were scared, and a lot of kids were no longer allowed to walk to school on their own. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. But for the Stainer family, time felt frozen at that one horrible day. Every phone call made their hearts stop. Every knock at the door could either mean his return or the confirmation of their worst fears. Stephen's brothers and sisters grew up in that emptiness of grief and unanswered questions. They had absolutely no idea that Stephen was, incredibly, still alive after all those years. His abductor, Kenneth Parnell, had already served time in prison before for kidnapping and sexually assaulting an 8-year-old boy in Bakersfield. After taking Stephen, the two of them drifted for the next 7 years between cabins, trailer parks, and motels. In those first few weeks, Stephen was drugged in an attempt to erase his memory. And over the course of those 7 years, he was forced to call his abductor Dad, all while being subjected to horrific abuse. He was even enrolled in a local school under the fake name Dennis. The school never checked his documents and had absolutely no idea that this child was actually the missing Stephen Stainer. On March 2nd, 1980, Stephen's older brother Carrie was on his way home from a camping trip to a place the family had visited before. He was with friends when he suddenly heard something on the radio that completely stopped him in his tracks. His 14-year-old brother Stephen had escaped from his abductor and was coming home that very same day.
7 long years ago, a youngster in California vanished.
Carrie later admitted he was so overwhelmed with happiness that he almost drove his car straight into a river. And it was true. Stephen, now 14 years old, had finally come home. Against all odds, he had survived the nightmare. And he was not alone. With him was 5-year-old Timmy White, who had been kidnapped just 16 days earlier. Stephen told police he could not allow Timmy to go through the same horrors he had suffered for years. He realized he had to fight for both of their survival and freedom. So when the opportunity finally came, he took Timmy and ran. With music playing in the background, the two boys hitchhiked and walked more than 40 miles to Ukiah. When they finally reached the police station, Stephen told the officer, "I know my name is Stephen. I died."
There he is. There he is.
Stephen's return has been a joyous event.
News vans flooded the quiet streets. Satellite dishes appeared in front yards overnight, and reporters crowded around the family's house desperate to capture a story that many people believed would never have a happy ending. Some friends and specialists quietly suggested that Stephen's mother, Kay Stainer, should get psychological help for her son, but she brushed the idea aside, insisting it was unnecessary. The family was already under enormous pressure. Life inside the house became tense as everyone struggled to adjust to the sudden shift from believing Stephen was probably dead to having him back under the same roof again. School was no safe place for Stephen either. Classmates mocked him and made cruel comments about his sexuality because his abuser had been a man. Kenneth Parnell was eventually arrested, and the family once again found themselves in the spotlight as the trial began. Stephen testified that Parnell had brainwashed him into believing his family could no longer afford to take care of him and that a court had supposedly given Parnell custody. Stephen said he had always been taught that adults do not lie, so he believed him. Although prosecutors said there was not enough evidence to pursue charges for sexual abuse, Parnell was convicted of kidnapping and unlawful imprisonment. After an 18-day trial in February 1982, he was sentenced to 8 years and 8 months in prison. He served only 5 years. After being released, Parnell did the exact same thing again, recruiting another person to help kidnap yet another little boy. He was caught and sent back to prison, where he died in 2008. For the Stainer family, Stephen's return should have been the end of the nightmare, but life never truly returned to normal. The family remained deeply broken, and the pain was never fully talked about. As the years passed, Stephen's kidnapping became just another tragedy the rest of the world slowly forgot. But in the mountains the family had always loved and explored, inside Yosemite National Park, another darkness was quietly beginning to grow. Nearly 20 years later, in July 1999, the discovery of Joey Armstrong's decapitated body sent panic through Yosemite. Joey Armstrong had grown up in Orlando and was one of the most beloved employees at the Yosemite Institute. People described her as creative, fearless, and full of life. If something scared her, she faced it head-on, throwing herself completely into everything she did. She had dreamed for years about becoming an instructor at Yosemite, and eventually she made that dream come true. Out there, Joey truly felt at home, doing what she loved and embracing everything the park had to offer. She was energetic, vibrant, and absolutely loved taking children on hikes through the park's wild trails while teaching them about its history, wildlife, plants, and insects. She would even tap dance in her hiking boots just to make her students laugh. Together with her boyfriend, instructor Michael Raffaelli, she lived a few miles away in a simple cabin they called the Greenhouse. "I love this home," she wrote to a friend back in Florida. "I love Michael with all my heart and every part of my body. I love the big meadow with all its daisies and the incredible history surrounding it." On July 21st, 1999, Joey arrived at work around 8 o'clock in the morning, and the day seemed completely normal. She told coworkers she felt nervous about spending the night alone in the cabin because both her boyfriend and her roommate were out of town. Not long before sunset, she started loading her things into the truck for the trip, the truck that would never leave the driveway. What made the case even more chilling was the fact that only a few months earlier, a woman and 2 teenage girls had vanished during another brutal crime that police believed they had already solved. Now, investigators were forced to confront a terrifying possibility. What if they had been wrong all along and the killer was still out there? 42-year-old Carol Sund, her 15-year-old daughter Julie, and Julie's 16-year-old friend Sina Peloso from Argentina became the focus of one of the largest search operations in the history of the region. Carol was described as an incredible woman. She advocated for children's rights and regularly appeared in court to speak for kids who could not defend themselves. Helping people and serving her community was the center of her entire life. Julie, just like her mother, always pushed herself to be the best and gave everything she had in whatever she did. Julie and Sina had been friends since before they could even walk. For them, this trip was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime. Carol's father, Francis, later recalled speaking with them on the phone that day. He said they sounded genuinely happy. According to him, they were having the best time of their lives. After dinner at the Cedar Lodge restaurant where they were staying, they returned to room 509 located in the far western wing of the motel. Once their Yosemite vacation was over, they were supposed to get back into the red Pontiac Carol had rented and drive to the airport to pick up Carol's husband, but they never showed up. Before long, police arrived at the motel and the search for the 3 missing women began. Yet the room itself revealed almost nothing. They had never checked out. The towels in the bathroom were wet, but their clothes were gone. The car had disappeared too. There were also no signs of violence, so in the beginning, investigators believed the women might have become lost or stranded somewhere in the wilderness. Massive search teams were deployed, and airplanes even flew over Yosemite National Park, hoping an aerial view might reveal some clue. Carol's mother, who was also named Carol, and her father Francis joined the search themselves, driving mile after mile trying to locate the missing car. Francis even searched through dumpsters near the motel, looking for blood-stained sheets, and that was when he noticed something strange. A Cedar Lodge maintenance worker was peeking around a corner, quietly watching him. Francis later said something about the situation felt wrong, even though he could not explain exactly why. But one thing was obvious. That worker was not his main concern. All he could think about was Carol, Julie, and Sina. Search crews combed through steep granite cliffs and dense pine forests. The landscape was massive and dangerous, mile after mile of wilderness where even experienced visitors could take one wrong turn and simply disappear without a trace. And there truly were no traces. Nothing at all. Not a single clue. And that forced investigators to consider the unthinkable. What if the women had actually been abducted? For weeks, hundreds of FBI agents alongside officers from the California Highway Patrol and rangers from the National Park Service searched Yosemite using helicopters and dogs. On March 19, 1999, a little more than a month after the disappearance, a tourist discovered a burned-out Pontiac on a remote logging road many miles away from Cedar Lodge. It turned out to be Carol's rental car. The fire had been so intense that flames reached trees nearly 25 feet tall and scorched their branches. Inside the trunk, investigators found the burned and bound bodies of Sina and Carol. There was no sign of Julie. Shoes and clothing were scattered around the vehicle, giving the family hope that Julie might somehow have survived and escaped. Investigators and agents poured everything they had into searching the surrounding area, hoping Julie was still alive somewhere nearby. Among the items recovered near the car was also a camera. Most of the photos were ordinary vacation pictures, but the final images were deeply unsettling. They showed all three women at Cedar Lodge on the night they disappeared, relaxed and smiling as they prepared to settle in for the evening. And then the photographs suddenly stopped. Fear spread through Yosemite in a way few people could remember ever seeing before. This place was supposed to feel safe. Violent crime here was almost unheard of. For years, the park had proudly carried the reputation of being one of the safest wilderness areas in America, where rangers rarely dealt with anything more serious than petty theft or lost hikers. But now, that illusion of safety had shattered. Parents called in panic. Leaders of youth groups asked which trails should be avoided, and visitors who once explored the park alone now stayed close to organized tours. One woman visiting the park struck up a conversation with a maintenance worker. She mentioned how terrible it was that Julie still had not been found. The worker replied that he understood that feeling all too well. His own brother had once gone missing too, and he hoped Julie would be found soon. Just days later, the FBI received a letter. Inside was a hand-drawn map showing a trail from Highway 120 with an X marked near the shoreline of Don Pedro Reservoir. The note included a chilling message. "We had a lot of fun with this one." The FBI wasted no time and immediately headed to the location marked on the map. They released a search dog, and the dog quickly made a horrifying discovery. Julie had finally been found. Her body was hidden in thick brush near an overlook by Don Pedro Reservoir, only a few miles from where the car had been abandoned. Her throat had been cut. It was an extremely violent murder. By spring, the FBI had narrowed its focus to two primary suspects from Modesto. Both men were former criminals with violent pasts and serious drug problems. Michael Lewick and his half-brother Eugene Dykes were already sitting in the Modesto County Jail at the time. Lewick had been arrested for allegedly shooting at a police officer, while Dykes was locked up for violating parole and possessing drugs. Behind the scenes, FBI agents were telling reporters that acrylic fibers analyzed at the Bureau's laboratory in Washington connected the men to the murders. In June, James M. Maddock, head of the FBI office in Sacramento, even publicly stated, "All the main players are already in custody, but we're not rushing to file charges." News that the people responsible were probably already behind bars brought an enormous sense of relief. For the first time in months, people felt like they could finally breathe again. But then Joey was murdered. And suddenly people began to wonder if law enforcement had gotten it horribly wrong. Joey's mother contacted the FBI as soon as she heard a body had been found. She asked whether the victim had red hair like Joey. They refused to answer her. Then she saw the newspaper headline splashed across the front page. "Yosemite naturalist decapitated." That was how she learned the truth. And just like that, the fear returned all over again. Rangers were flooded with calls from terrified visitors wanting to know which areas of the park might now be dangerous. Requests for organized hikes skyrocketed as people searched for any sense of safety. Then finally, someone came forward with an important piece of information. One employee had driven past Joey's cabin around the time she disappeared and noticed a distinctive blue and white 1979 International Scout parked nearby. When police checked the registration records, they discovered only 2 vehicles matching that description were registered in the area. One of them belonged to a maintenance worker at Cedar Lodge, the same place where Carol, Julie, and Sina had vanished. Police immediately issued a bulletin for the vehicle. Just a few days after Joey's murder, 2 rangers spotted the same truck parked along California 140 in the Merced River Canyon. After climbing down toward the riverbank, one ranger and a detective from Mariposa County found a man lying naked in the sun smoking marijuana. He introduced himself as Carey. The officers confiscated the drugs but let him go. But that did not mean investigators stopped watching him. The vehicle remained their strongest lead because the coincidence seemed far too suspicious. The FBI compared tire tracks from the crime scene to photographs of the truck's tires. They matched perfectly. 2 days later, the 37-year-old man was eating lunch at a nudist resort near Sacramento when he was arrested. Jeffrey Reinick, who was a special agent with the FBI at the time, later became the man who finally got him to talk. He carefully built trust with Carrie, and it paid off when the agent asked to speak with him alone. When Special Agent Reineck entered the room, Carrie was sitting there slumped over, clearly carrying something heavy inside him. Over the next 6 hours, he gave a horrifying confession. He admitted to murdering Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Sina Peloso, and Joey Armstrong. He was the Yosemite Killer, the friendly maintenance worker who helped guests at Cedar Lodge, the same man who watched Francis searching through dumpsters, the same man who casually mentioned that his own brother had once gone missing too. He was not simply a witness to the tragedy, he had created it. His name was Cary Stayner, the brother of Steven Stayner. Cary told the FBI that ever since childhood he had fantasized about violence against women and felt powerless against his urges to kill. For months, the murderer had been hiding in plain sight, quietly working at Cedar Lodge while investigators desperately searched for answers. FBI agents had even interviewed Cary Stayner twice early in the investigation, but decided he was not involved. To them, he seemed polite, ordinary, and completely unremarkable. On top of that, his personal history and the tragedy involving his brother made it almost impossible for people to imagine that he himself could become such a brutal criminal. Most Americans only recognized his name because of the headlines about his brother's kidnapping years earlier. But who was Cary Stayner really? He was born on August 12, 1961, and grew up in the farming town of Merced. He was the oldest of 5 children born to Delbert, a maintenance worker who sometimes worked 18-hour days during harvest season, and his wife Kay, who ran a daycare and also worked in school cafeterias. The Stayner family lived in a small house on Betty Street. Cary attended the local public school and spent his summers swimming in the backyard pool and playing outfield on his baseball team. He was shy and withdrawn, rarely showing emotion or letting people know what he was feeling inside. When Cary was 11 years old, his entire world was shattered by Steven's kidnapping. Overnight, his family became trapped inside a story that spiraled far beyond their control, attracting a level of public attention few people could survive or even imagine. Years passed, yet there were still no answers about what had happened to Steven. Life continued for the family, but it was painfully difficult. Some neighbors who knew the Stayners as more than just newspaper headlines could see how deeply Steven's abduction had destroyed the family. "I think it affected Cary very deeply. I think it had a huge impact on Cary," said Michael Coleman, who had lived next door to the family for 2 decades. While his brother remained missing, Cary attended Hoover Intermediate School, where he was placed in a gifted 7th grade program. Later, he enrolled at Merced High School and spent most of his time drawing, reading comic books, and listening to heavy metal music. He became known for sketching caricatures of the people around him, turning classmates and acquaintances into exaggerated cartoon versions of themselves. That talent eventually earned him a role as a cartoonist for the school newspaper, and many of the people who worked with him believed he had a bright future ahead of him. He was the quietest guy you could imagine, almost a complete cliché. He was always drawing something, recalled Jack Bongart, who worked with him on the newspaper staff. "I honestly thought the next time I saw Cary's name in the paper, it would be because of his cartoons." Most people remembered Cary as someone who kept to himself. While other guys started dating, nobody could recall Cary ever going out with anyone. Some girls would tell his friends they liked him, but Cary never pursued anyone. A longtime neighbor, Victoria Flores Tatum, remembered a darker side of Cary. When he was 16, one of his sisters hosted a sleepover for her friends. Among the guests was 14-year-old Victoria. According to her, in the middle of the night, Cary crawled under her bed while she was sleeping and began touching her chest. She told him to leave, but he came back shortly after and stood naked in the doorway. She told him again to leave her alone, and that time, he did. Cary spent his teenage years as an 18-year-old without his little brother. And then suddenly, against all odds, Steven came home. For those who were close enough to see it up close, Cary's struggle wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there. It was slowly simmering beneath the surface while the family tried to move forward after a tragedy the rest of the world had only ever watched from a distance. In 1991, author Mike Eccles released a book titled, "I Know My First Name is Steven." One of the quotes from Cary in that book read, "I remember going outside one night after Steven disappeared and wishing on a star for my brother to come home. I did that almost every night whenever the sky was clear, right up until Steven finally came back. I never told anyone about it, but I still remember standing there wishing on that star for my little brother to return home." When Steven finally came home, Cary later said, "I walked a few blocks away from the house, looked up at the stars, and almost made another wish. Then I remembered Steve was already home. So instead, I just thanked that star. A television miniseries based on the story was later produced, and screenwriter J.P. Miller spent months with the family gathering material. During that time, Carey openly admitted he felt resentment. He came back and suddenly he was this huge deal, Carey said. After that, we never really got along anymore. I think I was jealous. Actually, I know I was jealous. It felt like I got pushed into the background. One especially revealing video showed the entire family standing together in the yard during a press conference, smiling for the cameras. But one person was not smiling. Carey stood stiffly behind everyone else, then quietly turned around and walked away. Instead of building the bright future people once expected from him, Carey drifted from one job to another with no real direction. He moved furniture, installed windows, fitted shower doors, and picked up whatever work he could find. Outside of work, he often sat around at friends' houses, smoking drugs and watching sitcoms. Beneath his quiet personality, disturbing urges were beginning to grow, impulses that even Carey claimed he did not fully understand himself. He once told a coworker he had been diagnosed with obsessive-compulsive disorder, but brushed it off by saying he controlled it with drugs. Although friends said he briefly dated a few women, Carey never seemed capable of forming lasting, stable, or truly intimate relationships. Then in 1990, the family was struck by another tragedy. Police were called to a house where Carey lived with his uncle Jerry. Jerry was found dead in a bedroom after being shot in the chest with a shotgun. Carey was questioned, but he had an alibi and claimed he had been at work. He also told investigators that a homeless man had been hanging around the property shortly before the murder, but the lead went nowhere and the case was never solved. One of Carey's later jobs involved cutting glass. One day, a friend found him violently punching a wooden board, badly slicing open his hand. Carey said he wanted to get into his truck, crash it through the office, kill his boss and everyone inside, then burn the place to the ground. The friend convinced him to seek help at a psychiatric center where he received counseling. Not long afterward, Carey returned to work, picked up his paycheck, and never came back. He told people he was thinking about moving to Santa Cruz. Later, in 1997, he was arrested for possession of marijuana with intent to sell. That same summer, he got a job as a maintenance worker at Cedar Lodge, a motel in El Portal along Highway 140, the road leading into Yosemite National Park. He handled everything from plumbing repairs to setting up pool furniture and taking care of endless small maintenance jobs needed to keep the motel running for guests. On weekends, Carey liked to sunbathe naked in remote spots along the river, and there was something else people noticed. He constantly carried a backpack with him. Inside that backpack, later described as his killer kit, investigators found a gun, duct tape, and a knife. Eventually, he started dating a waitress who worked at the motel and had 2 young daughters. Years later, one of the daughters described what it was like being around him. At first, she said, Carey seemed harmless, but the mask disappeared quickly. She remembered one incident near the river when Carey suddenly stripped completely naked. According to her, the situation made her deeply uncomfortable, so she turned away and kept walking along the river trying to ignore him entirely. More disturbing details about Carey continued surfacing after Special Agent Jeff Reinick revealed that Carey had allegedly planned to murder his girlfriend and her 2 daughters on February 15th. But when he noticed another person nearby, he realized the plan would no longer work, so he changed his target. February 15th, 1999.
Going all by itself. The window was open, the curtain was open, and I could see inside that there was 2 young women and the mother, man.
What came next was Carey Stainer's own account of what happened that night. Around 11 o'clock, he walked to room 509, carrying a toolbox filled with rope, duct tape, a knife, and a gun. He knocked on the door, introduced himself as a motel maintenance worker, and told Carol there had supposedly been a leak in the room upstairs, so he needed to check the ceiling for water damage. Carol was suspicious and looked around, noticing no signs of any leak, but Carey kept insisting until she finally let him inside. At first, he made casual conversation and even stepped into the bathroom to make his story seem believable. Then he walked back out holding a gun. He told them not to panic. He claimed he was only there to rob them. He tied them up and covered their mouths with duct tape, then forced Sina and Julie into the bathroom while Carol remained on the bed. Without saying a word, he quickly strangled Carol with a rope. I didn't realize how hard it is to strangle someone. It's not easy, he later said. After taking the keys, Carey dragged Carol's body outside and placed it in the trunk of the red Pontiac. When he returned to the room, he sexually assaulted Julie and Sina before separating them. He moved Julie into the bathroom of a neighboring room and left her there tied up while he cleaned the crime scene. Then he strangled Sina in the bathtub. Around 4 in the morning, Carey carried Julie out to the car and placed her in the front passenger seat. He later told the FBI that she still did not know her mother and Sina were already dead. He ripped the duct tape from her mouth and drove west through the dark Merced River Canyon without really knowing where he was going. Along the drive, he made ordinary small talk with the terrified girl as if nothing had happened. Shortly before sunrise, he pulled into an empty parking area, dragged Julie from the car, and carried her up a hillside toward Don Pedro Reservoir. Later, he told the FBI that Julie had been shivering from the cold and asked him to carry her. He claimed he held her in his arms the way a groom carries a bride across a doorway. A law enforcement source later said that detail revealed how deeply distorted his view of reality had become. In his mind, it fit into a fantasy that he and Julie somehow shared a special connection. He even later claimed he had grown attached to Julie after she gave him a fake name, Sarah, and said part of him wanted to let her live. When they reached the overlook, he sexually assaulted her again, brushed her hair back, supposedly told her he loved her, and then slit her throat. Afterward, he hid her nearly decapitated body in thick brush. Carey insisted he never tortured his victims and bizarrely claimed he wanted their deaths to be as painless and humane as possible. He then abandoned the car several hundred yards down a remote forest road near California, 108, before walking roughly 2 miles to Sierra Village, where he called a taxi and paid the fare with money stolen from Carol's purse. The driver, a woman named Jenny, remembered being unsettled by the exhausted and disheveled man who asked to be taken to Yosemite Lodge. At the time, she never reported the ride to police, but after Carey's arrest months later, she recalled the strange conversation they had during the drive. "Do you believe in Bigfoot?" he asked her. "No," she replied. "You should," he said, "because he's real." Back at the motel, Carey acted completely normal. He even guided FBI agents through different areas of the property while helping them collect evidence samples. The only moment he seemed to reference the murders came when he angrily complained to a coworker after noticing 2 FBI agents eating in the restaurant. "Why didn't the FBI ever search for my brother?" he asked. Carey later said he closely followed the FBI investigation while waiting for police to return and arrest him. When they never did, he realized he would not be able to stop himself from killing again. "I would have kept killing until I was either caught or killed," he said. He also explained that, like most of the staff, he had been temporarily laid off for the winter. But on March 20th, the day after the bodies of Carol and Sina were discovered, he was hired back at the motel. Carey also admitted that he was the one who wrote the letter and mailed it to the FBI, revealing where Julie's body could be found. Employees at Cedar Lodge often gathered in a restaurant area overlooking the trees along the river. Sometimes Carey would sit there with them while everyone openly discussed the murders, never realizing the killer was sitting right beside them.
For the past 2 years, Carey Stainer rented a room above the Cedar Lodge restaurant. He worked next door at the motel as a handyman, and it was at Cedar Lodge that local teens got to know him.
We were sitting there swimming. He walked in to do his job around the pool, do some handyman work, and Aaron hollered at him, told him to come over and meet us. And every day after that, pretty much that we were over there, we'd see him and talk to him for about 5 minutes.
Parker Bevington and Aaron Ludwig both work at the Chevron just down the road from Cedar Lodge. Both young men are stunned. The man they were friendly with has apparently confessed to last week's killing. They insist he couldn't have seemed more normal.
I've never even seen the man violent at all. He's never even really raised his voice, even when we're just sitting there talking.
He always made us feel pretty much like we had nothing to worry about. Never made us feel uncomfortable.
Carey also described the very first moment those dark fantasies began. He was only 7 years old. He was sitting alone in his parents' car while they went grocery shopping. Through the front windows of the store, he watched the women working at the checkout counters without taking his eyes off them. According to Carey, that was the first time he ever imagined what it would be like to kill someone. After that, the fantasies kept returning again and again. Dreams about trapping women and murdering them. He said he carried those thoughts inside himself for 30 years without telling anyone. Carey also admitted that part of him fantasized about having a television movie made about his crimes and his life. But what exactly happened to Joey? On July 21st, Carey said he drove along Foresta Road. According to him, it was an area where he once believed he had seen Bigfoot, a creature he had become almost obsessed with. He also said he had previously talked about Bigfoot with 26-year-old Joey. Carey claimed he ran into her by chance near her cabin, and once he realized she was alone, he could no longer control his urge to kill her. I was just throwing rocks into a creek nearby when I happened to notice her coming outside a few times. It looked like she was alone, he said. What came next was Carey's version of the events after he approached Joey. He drove up to her and, trying not to seem suspicious, asked if she had ever seen Bigfoot. He told her he once spotted the creature in the field behind her cabin. Once he confirmed she was truly alone, he pulled out a gun and forced her back inside. He tied her up, covered her mouth with tape, and then ordered her back outside. He forced her into his vehicle and drove away. Incredibly, Joey managed to open the car door and jump out while the vehicle was still moving. She sprinted through the woods along Crane Creek toward a friend's cabin that was only a few hundred yards away. Carey slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and chased after her. Joey made it about 150 yards before he caught up to her. He grabbed her from behind, slit her throat, and continued the attack until he decapitated her. Afterward, he dumped her body into a ditch and threw her head roughly 40 feet away. Then he rushed back to his vehicle and tried to leave the area. But he did not get far. The truck broke down and would not keep running. Carey then flagged down a park ranger who gave him a ride. Just moments earlier, he had abducted and brutally murdered a woman, yet to the ranger he appeared calm, friendly, and completely relaxed. Nothing about him seemed suspicious at all. Special Agent Reineck, the man who eventually got Carey to confess, later said Carey looked almost relieved after admitting everything, as though a massive weight had finally been lifted off him. But before confessing, Carey tried to negotiate. He claimed he wanted either the reward money given to his family, a prison assignment close to them, or, shockingly, access to child sexual abuse material. He then told the FBI, "I've been consumed by the urge to see that kind of material my entire life. It's sick, disgusting, and twisted. I know I won't be able to spend the rest of my life in prison and be happy without it." Reineck told him he could choose only one of the things he had requested. And Carey chose access to child sexual abuse material. He chose that over money for his family, and over the chance to be imprisoned closer to them. None of his demands were granted, but he still confessed. Carey admitted responsibility for the triple murder and said he had been planning the crime for more than a year. He also claimed he drew the map for the FBI because he could not stop thinking about Julie's body lying out in the open, still undiscovered. Yet on August 6th, he formally entered a plea of not guilty in court to the murders of Carol, Julie, and Sina. His parents sat inside the courtroom, but Carey refused even to look at them. Prosecutors later stated that he revealed details about the murders that had never been released publicly and were known only to investigators, further confirming the truth of his confession. In a letter he sent from jail to the Fresno Bee in mid-August, Carey wrote that he was truly very sorry for the pain he had caused and claimed he wanted to sell the rights to his story to Hollywood so the money could be given to the victims' families. "I understand that money would be little comfort after the loss of their loved ones, but until the jury, the judge, and the executioner have all played their parts in this case, it's the only thing I can offer," he wrote. After Carey's confession, investigators reopened several unsolved murders in the region, including the killing of his own uncle, who had been shot to death years earlier. Authorities also began looking into whether he could be connected to the murder of 23-year-old Sherilyn Murphy. In October 1994, her severed hands were discovered near a reservoir. 2 months later, her decapitated torso was found near a mountain road in Calaveras County. Her head was never recovered, and the investigation eventually went cold. Sergeant Steve Matthews from the Calaveras County Sheriff's Office said investigators had not established any direct connection between Carey and other unsolved murders in the area, but they also were not ruling out the possibility. After Carey's arrest, the FBI contacted the waitress he had been dating. Her daughter later recalled hearing news that made their blood run cold. "The FBI spoke privately with my mom and told her that Carey Stainer had originally planned to murder her, then sexually assault and kill my sister and me. They were also told that he had tried to carry out that plan 3 different times, including after Joey's murder. On the day he was arrested, Carey had allegedly been looking for them, but they happened to be staying at their grandmother's house instead." For many people, the truth was almost impossible to process, especially because of how ordinary Carey Stainer had seemed to everyone around him. One former reporter later said Carey never appeared suspicious at all and actually came across as helpful and friendly. He was the same guy opening up all the rooms for the FBI so they could collect evidence. Even for investigators, the truth was difficult to process, especially because before Joey's murder, they had been convinced they already knew who killed Carol, Julie, and Sina. James M. Maddock, head of the FBI office in Sacramento, later admitted that after Carey's arrest, he spent countless hours questioning whether the FBI could have done something to prevent Joey's death. "I still struggle with that question, and I continue to struggle with it," he said. But he also added that he believed investigators had done everything they reasonably could. Carol's parents said they felt a certain sense of relief after hearing about the arrest because it was better than letting their imaginations run wild. During the trial, the defense argued that Carey was so mentally ill, he could not fully understand his actions at the time of the murders. One doctor spent more than 21 hours interviewing Carey, along with several more hours speaking to his parents and reviewing his medical history in detail. The doctor described Carey as an extremely troubled man who inherited a long history of mental health issues, including exhibitionism and pedophilia. According to him, serious psychological disorders had existed within the family for at least 2 generations. He called it one of the most striking psychiatric histories he had seen in years. Dr. Silva testified that both Carey and his father suffered from paraphilia, a condition involving unusual sexual urges often connected to extreme or dangerous behavior. He also said both Carey and his mother struggled with depression. Dr. Silva told the court Carey showed signs of mild autism and obsessive-compulsive disorder, including compulsive hair pulling, which he said explained why Carey so often wore hats. According to the doctor, Carey began experiencing hallucinations that became increasingly sexual and violent over time. For example, Dr. Silva testified that Carey repeatedly fantasized about girls from his neighborhood being sexually assaulted. In some of those fantasies, he imagined rescuing them, while in others, he imagined joining in. The doctor said these thoughts began around the same time Carey's father started sexually abusing Carey's sisters. The court also heard that Carey himself had been sexually abused as a child, although the identity of the abuser was never confirmed. Dr. Silva argued that Carey could no longer control the obsessive images in his mind and was gradually losing touch with reality. He also said there was significant evidence suggesting Carey may have suffered brain damage, possibly caused by prenatal trauma. Prosecutors, however, argued the exact opposite. They described Carey as cold, calculating, and fully aware of what he was doing. According to the prosecution, he appeared to enjoy the fear and panic created by his crimes. A few nights after the murders, he returned to the abandoned Pontiac and scratched the words, "We have Sarah," onto the hood, using the fake name Julie had given him. Then he set the car on fire. The following week, he tossed Carol's wallet onto a street in Modesto in an attempt to mislead investigators. He even convinced someone else to lick the stamp on the letter mailed to the FBI. Prosecutors argued these were not the actions of a man incapable of understanding reality, and Carey Stayner was ultimately found legally sane. After just over 5 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted him of the intentional murders of Carol Sund, Julie Sund, and Sina Peloso. He was also convicted of 5 additional felony charges, including the sexual assaults of Julie and Sina and the robbery of the motel room. Those convictions made him eligible for the death penalty. The sentencing hearing became incredibly emotional and was filled with such disturbing evidence that at one point the judge suddenly walked out of the courtroom to compose himself. When he returned a few minutes later, his face was red and his eyes were wet with tears. The judge agreed with the jury's recommendation, and Carey Stayner was sentenced to death for the murders of Carol, Julie, and Sina. "He tortured my daughter," Carol's husband said. "I know it means nothing to him to kill little girls in the middle of the night. I only wish he would find the courage to accept his punishment now." Jose Peloso, Sina's father, traveled with his wife from Argentina to attend the trial. Through tears, he admitted he had thought about attacking Carey and breaking his neck. "Nothing can bring my daughter back," he said. "Her death is pain I'll carry for the rest of my life." During one earlier hearing, he actually tried to lunge at Carey before being restrained and removed from the courtroom. Carey's parents, Kay and Delbert, said they had expected the death sentence but still pleaded for mercy, arguing that he was a sick man who had not received a fair trial because of a biased judge. "I stand by my son," Delbert told reporters outside the courthouse. Carey also pleaded guilty in federal court to the murder of Joey Armstrong and received a life sentence for that crime. Under California law, his death sentence would automatically be appealed, a process that could take years. On top of that, California had not carried out an execution since 2006, making it increasingly unlikely that he would ever actually face execution. You may also wonder what happened to Carey's brother Stephen after finally returning home. His life was never easy, but eventually he got married and became the father of 2 children. His story later inspired the television film I Know My First Name is Steven. J.P. Miller, one of the writers, once said, "Steven was a little reckless after coming home. He crashed a few cars, and I remember warning him to be more careful because he could get himself killed. He looked at me and said, 'What is death anyway?'" After everything he had already survived, death probably felt very different to him. But Miller also said Steven worked incredibly hard to rebuild his life. He did not complain. He did not feel sorry for himself. He was simply a kind-hearted young man trying to move forward. On September 16, 1989, while riding his motorcycle home after working as a pizza delivery driver, a car suddenly pulled out in front of him. Steven was not wearing a helmet and suffered massive head injuries when he crashed into the driver's side door. The driver fled the scene. Less than an hour later, at only 24 years old, Steven Dana Stainer died. His wife Jody later said she had never felt such anger in her life. "Everything would have been different if the man who hit him had stayed there," she said. "No matter what happens, I'm going to make sure justice is done." The driver eventually turned himself in to police. Jody said Steven had finally become truly happy and was living a normal life with their two beautiful children. His kids were only 2 and 3 years old when he died. When Steven was killed, his parents were away on a hiking trip. Friends tracked them down and told them what had happened. They were devastated. Steven's mother later said it felt as though her son had only been borrowed from them for a short time. She was the one who stayed strong and composed through all 7 of those years, one family friend recalled. But now she's falling apart. This is the hardest thing she has ever faced, and she just can't talk about it. The same friend said Delbert was crushed by grief too, but was trying to stay strong for his wife. "After all these years, everything is okay now," Steven's father quietly said. "I know where Stevie is." The film I Know My First Name is Steven was nominated for 4 Emmy Awards, and Steven died the day before the ceremony. A statue honoring Steven was later placed in Applegate Park to recognize his courage, bravery, and the incredible act that saved not only himself, but also little Timmy White, and possibly many other children as well. But Steven was not the only person whose legacy lived on. A scholarship called Armstrong Scholars was created in Joey's memory to inspire young women and help give them the tools to pursue their dreams and goals. Carol Sund, Julie Sund, Sina Peloso, and Joey Armstrong were not just names in a case file. They were real people, loving people. Extraordinary people whose lives were stolen in a place where they should have been safe. Carol was a devoted mother who simply wanted to show her daughter the beauty of the world. Julie was only 15 years old, a smart and kind-hearted girl with her entire future ahead of her. Sina traveled from Argentina searching for opportunity and adventure, believing in the goodness of people. And Joey. Joey was a light inside Yosemite, an educator, a friend, and someone who believed deeply in protecting nature and sharing it with others. Their lives mattered, they were loved, and they deserved far more than the cruelty they were forced to endure.
Exclusive new details in the search for a missing South Dakota teenager last seen in metro Atlanta. 19-year-old Morgan Bauer vanished more than a month ago.
This month marks 3.5 years since a woman moved from South Dakota to Atlanta and then suddenly disappeared. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. Today, Morgan Bauer's mother came to downtown Atlanta to let people know about her daughter's case.
Last night, we first reported that the 2 suspects in the 2016 disappearance of Morgan Bauer are facing new charges in that investigation. Jonathan Warren and Caitlin Goebel are both facing murder and aggravated assault charges.
She was strangled. Her body was dismembered. Parts of her were burned in the backyard of a house in Porterdale, Georgia, and the truth didn't come out until 7 years after she disappeared. 19-year-old Morgan Bauer moved from Aberdeen, South Dakota to Georgia on February 12, 2016. She had $20, a couple of bags, and a housing arrangement she found on Craigslist. The very next day, after an argument, she was kicked out, so she checked into a motel. She didn't have a job at first. Later, she started dancing at the Top of Gainesville Club in Hall County. On February 25th, she finished her shift and left the club with Jonathan Warren and his girlfriend, Caitlin Goebel. The two of them told investigators they drove her 77 miles to Covington and dropped her off near a Citgo gas station. They claimed they watched her get into a green Mitsubishi Eclipse with an unknown man. After that, Morgan vanished. Her social media went silent. Her phone stopped connecting. Police didn't see immediate signs of a violent crime, so the case moved slowly. It stayed open, but there were no major breaks. But her phone data told a different story. The last signal didn't ping in Covington. It showed up in Porterdale about 3 miles away. That's where Jonathan had previously lived. Less than a mile from his house sits Yellow River Park. On February 26th, Morgan posted a video from that park. For 7 years, investigators believed she disappeared on the 25th. That video changed the timeline completely. And here's the part that really stands out in the background. Behind her, there's a man. His identity has never been confirmed. That detail directly contradicts Jonathan and Caitlin's story about the gas station in Covington. Then, on July 27, 2023, the FBI searched a property in Porterdale. By that time, the home had new owners. On the land, investigators discovered Morgan's skeletal remains. The missing person case was officially reclassified as a homicide. Jonathan Warren was arrested in Los Angeles. Caitlin Goel was taken into custody in Illinois. Both were held without bond. Caitlin later said she found Morgan dead in a bedroom inside the house. Jonathan pleaded guilty to malice murder, destruction of evidence, concealing a death, and necrophilia as part of a plea agreement with no fixed sentence. Prosecutors stated that Morgan was strangled. After that, her body was dismembered and burned. According to their case, Jonathan sexually abused the remains for several days. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Caitlin is still awaiting trial. She faces charges including malice murder, felony murder, and other related offenses. 7 years of silence ended with bones in the ground. And yet, what actually happened inside that house in Porterdale that night still, divides this case. So to really understand how all of this unfolded, we need to go back to the very beginning. At just 19 years old, Morgan Bauer was confident, fearless, and ready for change. On her wrist, she had a tattoo that read, "Whatever you love can be taken away, so live like it's your dying day." Her friend Taryn said Morgan wanted city life. Honestly, it didn't even matter which city, she just wanted something bigger, something more. Morgan left Aberdeen, South Dakota with just $20 her friend had given her and a few bags. That was it. She boarded a flight to Atlanta more than 1,000 miles away. Atlanta is big. It's alive. It's intense in its own way. This is the South, but it's also a fast-moving modern city. Glass skyscrapers sit right next to tree-lined neighborhoods and quiet residential streets. Summers are hot, there's a lot of sun, and you can almost feel the momentum in the air. It's got that southern openness, but at the same time, it moves like a major metro. You feel business, energy, music, creativity, all of it blending together. Midtown and downtown look dynamic and urban, while other areas feel calmer, greener, more relaxed. People often call Atlanta a city of opportunity because of how fast it keeps growing. It has a strong cultural identity and a serious impact on modern American music. There's history there, but there's also this new generation shaping everything. Overall, it's a city that doesn't stand still. By the way, where are you watching this from? And what time is it for you right now? I'm honestly really curious to see where my audience is. While you're typing that, I'll keep going. Before Morgan left, her mom, Sherry, handed her a penny and told her to keep it in her pocket for protection. Sherry knew her daughter had arranged to move in with someone she met on Craigslist. Morgan didn't have a job yet. She planned to look once she got there, but she had answered an ad for a housekeeper and roommate situation. The agreement was simple. She would help keep the house clean and organized until she was financially able to contribute. But, almost as soon as she started unpacking in the new place, everything fell apart. Within a day, her belongings were outside. She was kicked out after what was only described as an argument. So she checked into a motel. Going back to Aberdeen wasn't even an option in her mind. It had only been a day, but she was determined to stick it out. She was expecting a tax refund, so she believed once that money hit her account, she'd be able to manage for a while. Morgan had worked as a waitress before and applied to several jobs, but because she didn't have the necessary documents with her, her applications couldn't move forward. That stalled things. Eventually, she started dancing at the top of Gainesville Club in Hall County, Georgia, about 50 miles north of Atlanta, even though Atlanta had been her original destination. On February 25th, Morgan finished her shift at the club and left with another dancer and her boyfriend. And just when it looked like things might finally be stabilizing, like Maybe she was finding her footing 2 weeks after moving. She disappeared. Her social media suddenly went quiet. No responses on Snapchat. Her best friend, who talked to her almost every day, heard nothing. Her phone was either dead or turned off. Her mom, Cher, said Morgan wanted independence. She wanted a big city. She wanted to spread her wings. She dreamed about a fresh start opportunities she hadn't had before. She wasn't afraid of change. If anything, she chased it. She had plans, a future that was just starting to take shape. Cher said Morgan always stayed in touch, even when she was busy, even when she worked late. She would text, call, let her know she was okay. That was just who she was. She didn't disappear without saying something. So when she suddenly went completely silent, no messages, no calls, no activity anywhere that wasn't like her at all, not even close. For her mother, that silence wasn't just a pause. It was a red flag. And that's what made it so much more terrifying. Because when someone with dreams, plans, and constant communication just vanishes without a trace, it's rarely random. It's rarely nothing.
I didn't want her to go to Atlanta. It really worried me, she said. But Morgan does everything at 100%. She's the kind of person who goes all in.
The Atlanta Police Department stated that at that point, there were no signs of a violent crime. Early statements were cautious. Investigators emphasized they had no confirmed evidence of force or a struggle. Yes, she was independent. Yes, she stayed busy, trying to build a life, working, meeting different people. From the outside, her disappearance could have looked like a sudden decision, like maybe she just left, changed direction, started over somewhere else. But this level of silence, that wasn't normal. She wasn't contacting her family. She wasn't replying to messages. She wasn't showing up online at all. For someone who communicated regularly and was socially active, this felt off. Deeply off. And with each passing day, the anxiety grew heavier. Had she crossed paths with someone dangerous at one of the clubs where she worked? Or maybe something happened at one of the motels she stayed in? There were so many questions. Every theory was checked. Every small lead was analyzed. And still no concrete answers. Thousands of people shared Morgan's story across social media. Strangers reposted her photos, wrote messages of support, tried to keep her name visible. On Facebook, a group called Missing Morgan grew to more than 13,000 members. It became a space built on hope and waiting. People discussed possible scenarios, shared updates, supported her family, and even with all that attention, the truth remained out of reach. The silence continued, and the longer it lasted, the less it felt like chance.
Exclusive new details in the search for a missing South Dakota teenager last seen in metro Atlanta. 19-year-old Morgan Bauer vanished more than a month ago. Tonight, we've learned a big-name private investigator is on the case. Just hours ago, he spoke with CBS 46 investigative reporter Karen Greer.
We just keep going, keep praying that she'll be found sooner than later.
The family of 19-year-old Morgan Bauer has set up temporary residence at a cheap motel in Atlanta. Coming here last month from South Dakota, her mother, Sherry, is pulling out all the stops to find her. These donated billboards show the small-town teen's innocence. Photos online from the Gainesville strip club where she was last seen publicly tell a much different story of a teenager looking for a new life in the big city. Private investigator T.J. Ward, perhaps well known for his work in the case of missing high school student Natalie Holloway in Aruba, now hired to help find Morgan.
There's a lot of Facebook activity, whether it's her or friends that know where she is. But there's things that's changed as late as last night on her Facebook, and we're looking into that right now.
The page Ward is referring to is not Morgan's personal page, which hasn't been updated since she disappeared, but rather a public site with thousands of people posting comments and alleged sightings. Morgan was last seen and on social media February 25th.
There was a lot of pressure on her, and in this day and time, kids, when they get pressure, they run. And they think the grass is greener on the other side, which it isn't. And a short-term fix of making money is not the answer.
This is Tapa Gainesville. She came to work here that night and left and has not been heard from since.
That same night. The latest Facebook posts have sightings of Morgan in the Canton and Woodstock area. Ward is checking into it and adds nothing can be assumed.
This is a serious criminal investigation, And the City of Atlanta Homicide Unit is responsible for this. And these people online need to be very serious about what's going on. This is not a joke.
Ward says social media may be a blessing or curse in this case. With so many postings and so many people claiming to have seen Morgan, it keeps them busy. But they have to check into every lead because you never know which one will help them solve this case.
Like with anything online, the good always comes with the bad. Support was there, yeah, but so were rumors. And some of the comments were just cruel. Cher actually had to step in and remind people to be kinder. She said,
"This is not a story about a girl who asked for it or should have known better. It's about a girl who disappeared and deserves to come home safe. None of that other stuff matters. She is worth everything in this world, and she is deeply, endlessly loved. We want the focus to stay on Morgan and on finding her."
From everything police knew at the time, February 25th, 2016 became the pivotal day. That was the date listed in all the initial reports. That's where the timeline began. Everything that happened after she walked out of the club mattered. Every single minute of that evening and night was examined closely, almost under a microscope. Then a deeper analysis of her phone data and social media shifted the focus. Investigators reconstructed signal routes, checked cell tower connections, compared timestamps on posts. And that's when something important surfaced. The last phone signal wasn't where they expected. It pinged in Porterdale, nearly 80 miles from the top of Gainesville Club. That's not a short distance, not a few blocks, not the next neighborhood over. Almost 80 miles is roughly an hour and a half by car. The data looked precise. It didn't feel random. So the question became obvious, why would she be there? Did she go willingly? Was she with someone? Was that always part of the plan? Because if her phone was in Porterdale, then her route that night was completely different from what had first been assumed. And right there, the direction of the investigation started to change. At that point, it was known that Morgan left the club with two people, Jonathan Warren and Caitlin Goel. They were the last confirmed individuals seen with her that night. That detail mattered. It established the final known location and the last circle of people she was with before she disappeared. Caitlin, who was also a dancer, and Jonathan, her boyfriend, told investigators they last saw Morgan when they dropped her off near a Citgo gas station. According to them, that's where their interaction ended. After that, they said, they didn't know where she went. Surveillance cameras didn't provide clear answers. No additional witnesses stepped forward. And from that moment on, no one saw her again. Her trail just stopped. The investigation was extensive. Local law enforcement worked alongside federal agencies. Witnesses were interviewed. Phones were analyzed. Security footage was reviewed. Digital evidence was examined in detail. But despite all that effort, progress was slow. Information often conflicted. Some statements didn't line up with others. Time kept moving, and the full picture just wouldn't come together. The person she had met through Craigslist was, of course, interviewed early on. That was standard procedure. Any new connection gets checked, but the FBI never publicly named him as a suspect. There were no official statements suggesting involvement, and that lead didn't become central to the case. Months passed with almost no new information. Leads were rare, and when they did appear, they often fell apart under scrutiny. Every new tip brought a spark of hope and then disappointment. Before long, a year had gone by, and what had started as an active search for a missing 19-year-old was slowly turning into something else. Waiting.
This month marks 3.5 years since a woman moved from South Dakota to Atlanta and then suddenly disappeared. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. Today, Morgan Bauer's mother came to downtown Atlanta to let people know about her daughter's case.
At a community event in downtown Atlanta,
"This is my daughter, Morgan. She's been missing in Atlanta for 3.5 years.
Sherry Keenan is handing out photos and missing persons flyers today of her daughter, Morgan Bauer.
There isn't a lot of information out there. Morgan is a cold case, but an active cold case with the Atlanta Police Department.
Keenan remains hopeful her daughter is somewhere in town or elsewhere and is safe.
We hope that somehow she sees this on the news and she knows that we're still searching for her and will never stop looking.
Atlanta police still have Bauer's case listed online, but new leads are needed. Morgan is described as having her ears gauged, lips pierced twice, and has several tattoos. Keenan says a $10,000 reward is being offered in her daughter's case.
Anybody who knows anything or has seen anything, please just reach out. It just takes one moment.
In downtown Atlanta, I'm Joe Hankey, 11 Alive News.
7 years had passed since anyone had last heard from Morgan. 7 years of silence, of uncertainty, of this heavy, exhausting waiting. In that time, circumstances changed. People moved away. Theories surfaced and then faded. But the central question never went away. 7 years is long enough for a case to slowly drift out of the public spotlight. That's just how it happens. News cycles move on. New stories replace the old ones. But for her family, this wasn't some archived file or a statistic buried in a database. It was thousands of days without answers, without explanation, without any kind of closure. And something had to shift. There had to be a new lead, a new piece of evidence, one solid fact that could finally move the investigation forward. Because without that, the case risked becoming one of those unresolved stories, the kind that just sits there, full of questions no one ever answers.
Before now, police believe that Morgan went missing 7 years ago tomorrow on February 25th, but our 11 Alive investigators have discovered a discrepancy that could shift.
On February 26th, Morgan posted a video on social media from Yellow River Park. Just a simple clip, a few seconds of calm atmosphere, trees, quiet, nothing dramatic. But that video only came to light recently, and it changed everything. For 7 years, everyone believed Morgan disappeared on February 25th, 2016. That date was fixed in the minds of her family, her friends, investigators. It was the starting point. But if she posted that video on February 26th, then she was alive at least 1 day longer than originally thought. The entire timeline shifted. When investigators took a closer look at the Instagram video, they noticed something that hadn't stood out before. Behind her, walking briefly through the frame, was a man. No clear facial features. Just a figure passing through. Still, his presence raised new questions. Who was he? No one could definitively identify him. Maybe he was just a random passerby, or maybe he wasn't. That detail, combined with updated phone data, led investigators back to two people they had questioned before. Morgan's phone last pinged in Porterdale, Georgia, an area that hadn't initially been treated as central to the case. Now, it suddenly mattered. Throughout all these years, one confirmed fact never changed. She left the club that night with Jonathan. That was verified. He was among the last people to be seen with her. Jonathan Warren and Caitlin Goel maintained the same core version of events. They said they left the club with Morgan, and for reasons that were never fully explained, drove her 77 miles to Covington. According to them, they dropped her off near a Citgo gas station, and that was the last time they saw her. Later, they also told investigators they watched her get into a green Mitsubishi Eclipse with an unknown man, an unfamiliar car, an unidentified driver. A detail that complicated everything and made verification difficult. But now there was a problem. Law enforcement knew Morgan's phone had last signaled in Porterdale, just 3 miles from Covington, and the same town where Jonathan had previously lived. A precise location on a map. And it didn't align with the story about leaving her at Citgo. On top of that, the Instagram video from Yellow River Park in Porterdale was posted on February 26th, less than a mile from Jonathan's former house. That was a serious contradiction. If she had supposedly been dropped off in Covington, how do you explain her being in Porterdale the next day? The gap between their statements and the technical data was becoming impossible to ignore. Investigators began considering a different possibility that they all left the club together, drove to Porterdale, and eventually ended up at Jonathan's house. In light of the new evidence, that scenario started to make more sense. By then, Jonathan had already moved to Los Angeles, but that house still needed to be searched. Its past might have been holding answers for years. From the beginning, Jonathan and Caitlin were persons of interest. But now, with the phone data in hand, police had grounds for a search warrant. The digital evidence became the missing piece, the thing that allowed investigators to move from suspicion to action. 7 years after Morgan disappeared, the Federal Bureau of Investigation arrived at the property in Porterdale and began their search. And the silence that had lasted for years, it was finally starting to break.
Anthony Walden with the Porterdale Police Department. Today, we've executed a search warrant, currently executing a search warrant. It's part of an ongoing investigation into missing person Morgan Bauer at number 2 South Broad Street. So far, the search has located items of evidentiary interest.
Forensic teams combed through every corner of the house and the surrounding property. The work was slow, methodical. Every room was photographed. Every surface was checked for traces. Specialists moved carefully, step by step, making sure nothing was overlooked. The property required an extended search because it wasn't just a house. It sat on a large piece of land with wide open space around it. The yard, outbuildings, more remote sections of the lot, all of it had to be examined. The ground itself was searched in sections. What once looked like an ordinary private residence was now being treated as a potential crime scene. The sheer size of the area demanded time, resources, and patience. And here's something else. By that point, the property had new owners. They had no idea. To them, it was just a home they had purchased, unaware of its history. So, when agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation showed up, it came as a shock. Suddenly, the space they had been living in carried a completely different weight, like the walls themselves were holding onto something no one had seen before.
We don't know if it's Morgan or if it's something else that they recovered. They're not really sharing that information publicly. And of course, Morgan is still considered a missing person.
Morgan's mother, Sherry, says authorities have kept her in the loop as much as they can.
They've made it very comfortable for me to be able to feel very much a part of what's happening, even though there's not a lot of information that they can give me. They've been very inclusive.
And within the whirlwind of emotions that came from yesterday's breakthrough is sympathy for the owners of the property, who authorities say have been cooperative.
My heart just goes out to that family, and they must be going through a lot, also. And it must be very upsetting for them. And so my heart just goes out to everyone involved. At this point, after 7 years, I feel like, in my heart, I already kind of know if I found something, I'm going to do what I said I would. I'm going to go to Atlanta and I'm going to bring my daughter home.
For 7 years, Cher handed out flyers, organized memorial events, and spoke to anyone willing to listen. Over and over, she printed the same photo of her daughter, the same look in her eyes, the same smile frozen in time. She approached strangers, explained what had happened, asked them to pay attention, not to look away. The memorial gatherings weren't just about remembrance. They were a reminder that the search was still ongoing. Candles, flowers, short speeches, and this constant hope that maybe someone would remember something, even the smallest detail. Every year added more weight, but it never weakened her determination. She spoke to reporters, neighbors, volunteers, random people passing by, repeating the same facts again and again. For her, it wasn't just an obligation. It was a way to keep Morgan present in a world that was slowly, quietly getting used to her absence.
I'm not ready to say goodbye until she's found, she said.
But sadly, this is where Morgan's missing person case turned into a homicide investigation. Up until that moment, there was still this fragile hope. Maybe there was another explanation. Maybe she had left voluntarily. Maybe there would be a message, a sign, any proof that she was alive. After the discovery, that hope was gone. Her skeletal remains were found on the property. This wasn't just another development in the case. It was confirmation. Confirmation of death. The location that had once simply been part of the search suddenly became a crime scene. Every foot of land was treated as potential evidence. Experts worked quietly, carefully, documenting everything down to the smallest detail. At that point, there was no more uncertainty about her fate. Only questions remained: how, when, and why. And the investigation moved forward no longer as a search for a missing woman, but as a murder case.
Breaking news at 9, we just learned 2 people arrested in connection to a Metro Atlanta cold case from 7 years ago.
Well, Tori, we've been reporting on this since a little over a week ago, and this is a major break in a case that her loved ones feared was cold.
Within a few weeks, 2 people were taken into custody. The arrests happened separately in different states. 33-year-old Jonathan Alexander Warren was detained in Los Angeles. 27-year-old Caitlin Goel was arrested in Illinois. The distance between those locations only underscored how wide this investigation had stretched. And when they were arrested, the case finally had specific faces, specific names. Both were held without bond. The court determined the risks were too high to allow release while proceedings continued. So, they remained in custody, with limited contact, while the public was already aware of the accusations. Caitlin admitted she had been inside the house. She did not deny being there. However, she claimed she walked into a bedroom and found Morgan's body. According to her, Morgan was cold and not breathing. The statement sounded simple. direct. She insisted she only discovered her. Investigators evaluated those words alongside other evidence and the established sequence of events. In August 2023, Jonathan was formally charged with malice murder, aggravated assault, concealing a death, and tampering with evidence. The list itself reflected the seriousness of the allegations. Each charge carried its own legal weight, each one something prosecutors intended to argue in court. Caitlin was charged with concealing a death and tampering with evidence. At that stage, those were the counts defining her legal position. The investigation was still ongoing, and further decisions depended on additional interviews, evidence, and prosecutorial review.
Last night, we first reported that the two suspects in the 2016 disappearance of Morgan Bauer are facing new charges in that investigation. Jonathan Warren and Caitlin Goebel are both facing murder and aggravated assault charges.
However, after multiple additional interrogations and a grand jury decision 2 months later, both of them were indicted on full murder charges. The investigation intensified. Detectives kept returning to reports, cross-checking statements, reanalyzing timelines. The grand jury's decision marked a turning point, a formal confirmation that the collected evidence was considered sufficient to proceed with full prosecution. From that moment on, the case entered a different phase, stricter, more uncompromising. Jonathan was also charged with an additional count necrophilia. That charge stood out as especially disturbing. It reflected allegations of actions that, according to investigators, occurred after Morgan's death. The wording in the legal documents was clinical, almost detached, but the implications were deeply unsettling. Caitlin was indicted on charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, tampering with evidence, and concealing the death of another person. The list was extensive. Each count represented a separate legal component the prosecution intended to prove in court. Together, the charges outlined what prosecutors believed was her full involvement. Prosecutors publicly stated they did not believe Caitlin's version of events, the claim that she simply found Morgan already dead. In their view, that story didn't align with the physical evidence or the established sequence of events. They pointed to inconsistencies in her statements and circumstances that, they argued, suggested active participation rather than accidental presence. After his arrest, Jonathan told investigators that Caitlin had an interest in forensic pathology and had allegedly expressed a desire to kill someone in order to dismember a body. Those statements became part of the interrogation record. Prosecutors later referenced them when discussing possible motive. At the same time, it's important to understand those claims came from a co-defendant. And like all such statements, they are evaluated in court within the broader context of evidence, credibility, and any potential motives the speaker himself may have had. And that's where the legal battle truly began.
A quiet river.
I just can't even believe I'm saying 7 years.
A Yellow River Park.
Painful. It's been difficult.
Is the last place Morgan Bauer's phone pinged.
There are times where I do feel alone just because it's hard for anybody to understand what this feels like.
But tonight, Sherry Keenan isn't alone.
And we just pray that
these people joined in hand and spirit to remember Morgan at a vigil.
I hope that it connects to somebody. I just am trying to just be really here, humbly, and just laying prayers. I'm so grateful that you all took time out to be here today.
She's been waiting to find her daughter for 7 years.
Thank you.
Never giving up hope of a happy ending.
And I think just that collective moment of everybody just making the same wish or the same prayer or the same thought in the same intention, can create miracles.
Jonathan entered a plea agreement without a predetermined sentence and pleaded guilty to malice murder, tampering with evidence, concealing the death of another person, and necrophilia. That meant there were no guarantees about what sentence he would receive. He essentially placed his fate in the hands of the court, admitting to the most serious charges brought against him. What had previously existed as accusations was now acknowledged in open court. As part of the agreement, the charges of felony murder and aggravated assault were dismissed. Some counts were removed from the case file, but that did not lessen the weight of the crimes to which he admitted guilt. The deal was a procedural step. It did not soften the impact of what was described during the hearings. Prosecutors outlined disturbing details. They stated that Morgan was strangled, that her body was then dismembered and burned. In the courtroom, those words landed heavily. Each statement added another layer of horror. According to the prosecution, Jonathan sexually abused the dismembered remains over the course of several days. Those allegations became some of the most shocking elements of the entire case, defining the scale of brutality described. Prosecutors also said that during interrogations, Jonathan claimed he and Caitlin had consumed parts of the remains. That statement went beyond what most people can process. At the same time, those claims were not independently confirmed and were not part of his formal guilty plea. They remained statements made during questioning, without separate legal codification in the final judgment. The prosecution sought to introduce social media evidence, including TikTok videos in which Caitlin allegedly discussed interests in serial killers and occult themes. They argued that her digital activity could provide insight into her mindset and personal interests. There was also mention of another explicit video involving her that prosecutors intended to present as contextual material. Some sources claimed that in one of the videos she appeared to be holding an object resembling a severed head. However, the footage itself was not publicly released or shown in open distribution. No officially disclosed images were made available to the broader public. That aspect remained based on statements, not on widely accessible evidence. Prosecutors additionally sought to submit Caitlin's social media posts, personal writings, and notes, as well as Jonathan's statements regarding her alleged occult practices and fascination with themes related to death. They aimed to build a comprehensive picture of her interests, arguing that it was relevant to motive. Jonathan was expected to testify about conversations and behavior he claimed to have observed before Morgan's death. Prosecutors suggested that his testimony could be significant, as he had been in close contact with her during the critical period. Whether his statements would strengthen the prosecution's case remained a matter for the court. The judge did not immediately rule on the admissibility of this evidence. That issue remained open. Some materials could potentially be presented to a jury, while others could be excluded as prejudicial or irrelevant. The decision had not yet been finalized. As previously noted, Jonathan entered the plea without an agreed-upon sentence, requesting life imprisonment with the possibility of parole. It was, in effect, an attempt to preserve at least a theoretical chance of release decades in the future. However, given the severity and particularly disturbing nature of the circumstances outlined in court, the judge's final decision had the potential to be definitive and irreversible, and the weight of the facts presented made leniency increasingly unlikely.
Jonathan Alexander Warren was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole after pleading guilty to his part in the 2016 disappearance of 19-year-old Morgan Bauer.
He has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Those words were delivered clearly, without emotion, almost like a dry legal statement. There was no sympathy in them, no relief, just finality. And that finality means one thing: he will spend the rest of his life behind bars, with no chance of getting out early, no second chance, no fresh start. The doors that closed behind him, they are not opening again. For the family, this ruling was the moment justice was finally spoken out loud. But justice is not the same as healing. A sentence does not erase pain. It does not turn back time. It simply puts responsibility into legal terms. It draws a line and says, this is what it is. Life in prison without the possibility of parole is the harshest punishment a court can hand down in cases like this. It sends a clear message that what was done was so severe, so devastating, that society is no longer willing to take the risk. It is permanent. It is absolute. And yet, even after the verdict, there is still silence, because no court decision, no matter how strong or final, can bring Morgan back.
The Newton County District Attorney said the indictment against Goebel is still pending tonight. Morgan's mother.
The case against Caitlin is still ongoing. The trial isn't over, and the tension around it hasn't eased. Jonathan, according to available information, is cooperating with prosecutors. He's reportedly planning to testify against her and convince the jury that she was the one obsessed with the idea of killing and dismembering someone. That claim could become a key piece of this trial, but it could also completely shift how each of them is seen. In the courtroom, those words land differently, colder, harsher, more final. Will we ever learn the full truth? That's still unclear. Some cases leave behind more questions than answers. Sometimes the truth gets lost between conflicting versions, plea agreements, and strategic testimony. And, when that happens, it can feel like clarity is always just out of reach. The individuals charged in the disappearance and murder of Morgan are currently in custody and facing the law. They're no longer free. Behind them, there are cells, guards, locked doors. Ahead of them, verdicts and official rulings. But even that doesn't restore what was taken. When she disappeared from all contact in February 2016, that was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Her phone went silent. Messages were left unanswered. Her social media just froze. For her loved ones, that silence felt unnatural, alarming, painful. But the real heavy silence lasted 7 years. 7 long years of uncertainty, of waiting, of hope that grew more fragile with each passing month. Even now, with Jonathan Warren behind bars and Caitlin Goel awaiting trial, the full answers may never come, and even if they do, they won't change what matters most. Some voids cannot be filled by testimony. Even if the truth is spoken in open court, even if every detail becomes public, Morgan is still gone, and that is the one undeniable fact. Her hopes, her dreams, her plans, they will forever remain 19 years old. She never got the chance to live the life that was just beginning. Her future stopped at the very moment it should have been unfolding. Morgan's story is the story of a young woman who wanted big changes, adventure, a path of self-discovery in a new part of the world. She lived boldly. She wasn't afraid of the unknown. She chased her dreams, even when that meant leaving everything familiar behind, stepping outside her comfort zone and moving toward a brand new life. There was more determination in her than fear. Like, she really believed in that next chapter. Morgan's stepmother, Leah, once said, "Morgan has now been gone from our lives longer than she was physically present in them." Those words carry years of pain, years of missed holidays, birthdays, family dinners. She added, "Everything that was taken from Morgan was taken from us as well." We never got the chance to watch her grow up, to see her do the things children do when they become adults. Her brothers will never have the opportunity to build a relationship with her as adults. This is not just the loss of one person. It's the loss of future memories, future conversations, support, family moments that will never become real. She also said, "The horrific things that were admitted and established during the investigation, that's all we have left. And that's something no parent should ever have to hear." Those words sounded like a sentence passed on reality itself. Because sometimes the truth is not relief. Sometimes it's just another weight to carry. During one of the many memorial evenings, her mother, Cher, said,
"In the glow of these candles, I see reflections of the light my daughter brought into our lives. She was a radiant spark of joy, laughter, and unconditional love. And tonight, as we hold these candles, let them symbolize the warmth of her soul, a warmth that is still shining brightly in our hearts. The light of my daughter may no longer be visible like a flame, but it lives on in the hearts of those who loved her." Today, let's honor Morgan's memory by promising to live with the same kindness, compassion, and joy she shared so generously with everyone.
Here at home, the murder of a jogger in Queens has left a community on edge as the hunt for her killer continues.
At around 10:30 at night, police officers were moving slowly through the thick reeds along the running trail in Spring Creek Park in Brooklyn. Then, suddenly, they heard a man scream. When the officers rushed closer, they saw a father standing over his daughter's body. Karina Vetrano, a 30-year-old woman, was lying face down on the ground. Her athletic top and shorts had been pulled down. There were bruises on her face. Her teeth were broken, and her legs were covered in scratches. The officers tried to pull the father away from her body, but he wouldn't let go. He just kept repeating the same words over and over. "I have to take my daughter home." Just a few hours earlier, Karina had simply gone out for a run. She was an experienced runner and used to jog along that trail all the time with her father. But that day, he stayed home because of a back injury. Right before she left the house, she told him everything would be fine. 2 hours passed, and she never came back. When detectives began examining the crime scene, one thing became painfully clear. Karina had fought until the very end. At one point, she even bit her attacker so hard that she broke her own teeth. Investigators later found DNA under her fingernails. But when they ran it through the national database, it didn't match anyone. Which meant only one thing. Somewhere nearby, there was a man who had brutally attacked a woman in the middle of the day and then disappeared without a trace. But what investigators discovered later turned out to be far more horrifying than just a murder. DNA analysis revealed a terrifying secret, and when police finally found the killer, some of the officers said it was so disturbing that, It honestly gave them chills. A few of them even needed psychological help afterward. So, to really understand how this all happened, we have to go back to the very beginning. All right, friends, let me pause for just a minute. I'm really curious where my audience is watching from. So if you don't mind, tell me what city you're in and what time it is where you are right now. Thanks for taking a moment to do that. Drop it in the comments. And now, let's keep going. Karina Vetrano, a 30-year-old runner, was the kind of person who always pushed herself, always trying to go a little farther and a little faster. That day didn't seem any different from the others. At around 5 in the afternoon, she stepped out of her house to go for a run near Spring Creek, a quiet area that's part of East New York and Brooklyn. Spring Creek is a natural preserve that covers about 2 square miles. It's full of overgrown patches, tall weeds, and thick brush. The place sits just a few blocks from the home where Karina lived with her family. Most of the time, she ran there with her father, Phil, a retired firefighter. But that day, he stayed home because of a back injury. Phil felt uneasy about her going there alone. The area was pretty isolated. And, he told her he didn't think it was a good idea for her to run there by herself.
Don't worry, I'll be fine, she told him.
Just a few minutes before heading out for her run, Karina took a quick selfie. In the background of the photo, you can actually see her mom, Kathy, walking past behind her. Then Karina left the house. Phil later said that about 45 minutes after she walked out the door, he suddenly had this uneasy feeling, like something just wasn't right. By then, almost 2 hours had passed. Karina still hadn't come home. Phil tried calling her over and over again, but she never answered. So he reached out to a childhood friend of his who was working with the New York City Police Department at the time. A patrol car was sent to the area to look for her. When officers couldn't find Karina, the search quickly expanded. Units from the 106th Precinct joined in, moving through thick reeds that were as tall as 10 feet. And even as night fell, the search continued. When we were going along the trail and checking the area, there was this really strong sense of unease, said NYPD Detective Barry Brown. At one point, someone even said out loud, this doesn't feel right. Phil was also helping police during the search, using the geolocation signals from Karina's phone. Investigators eventually moved toward a marshy area about 15 feet off the running trail. Local residents had raised concerns about that area before. The tall weeds there had long been considered a safety problem for the community. At around 10:30 that night, officers suddenly heard a man screaming and immediately ran in that direction. It was Phil. He had found his daughter's body lying face down on the ground. Officers had to physically pull him away because he just couldn't let her go. He kept repeating that he needed to take her home. Detectives, including Barry Brown and Lieutenant John Russo, determined that Karina had bruises on her face and multiple injuries. Her teeth were broken, and there were abrasions on her legs. Her athletic top and shorts had been pulled down. Police said there was evidence pointing to sexual assault. Karina had fought her attacker so fiercely that she bit him with such force that she broke her own teeth. Investigators also noticed that one of her hands was tightly gripping grass, which suggested she may have been dragged across the ground. The chief of detectives, Boyce, later said it was obvious that she fought until the very end. The Office of the Medical Examiner later performed an autopsy and determined that her death was a homicide caused by strangulation. While the killer was choking her, he pressed his hand against her neck so hard that police could actually see the imprint of his hand. Phil later said he felt like it was somehow meant to be him who found her. She led me to her. She needed her dad to be the one who found her. There's no doubt about that, he said.
It's one of the most intense and difficult crime scene searches in recent years. The view from Chopper 2 shows the demanding scope of the task.
We have a very active crime scene in a very remote area. So we're searching this as best we can in a very tough condition. The grass is very high. We're using machetes to search for additional evidence wherever we go.
Thursday, dozens of detectives fanned across Howard Beach, interviewing landscapers and home improvement workers.
They're just asking us what time we shut up and were you working Tuesday. They want this guy, whoever he is. I hope they get him.
Tonight, teams of search crews continue to tackle the dense weeds 300 feet at a time. First, hacking away by hand with machetes. They don't want to damage any possible clues as they clear the area.
We're clearing a very vast area in the back adjacent to the crime scene, and we're conducting a search for evidence.
The mother and father are just visibly shaken. They want closure. They want justice. They want to be able to bury their daughter with dignity.
We all jog and we all walk out here and enjoy, the serenity. And now I'm afraid to go out.
At his latest briefing, the chief of detectives calling this case, quote, a severe community threat and taking the following steps. A 6-month review of all Parks police activity in the area, collecting information from the police department's sex offender monitoring unit, and continuing with their cell phone tower investigation. But so far, just the possibility that the killer may not have been someone Karina Vetrano knew, well, it certainly leaves residents on edge.
My concerns is that, if it's somebody that lives in the area, that he might do it again.
Karina's father described Karina Vetrano as cheerful, driven, and successful, the kind of daughter every parent dreams about. Even though she was only 4 feet 11 inches tall, her personality was incredibly strong. She was very intelligent and had earned a master's degree from St. John's University. While still living with her parents, she worked as a speech therapist in Manhattan, helping children with disabilities. According to her friend Erica, Karina was like a spark, a tiny firework of energy with this contagious laugh that, could fill an entire room. Besides her job as a speech therapist, she also worked part-time as a promoter at a club in Astoria, where she invited guests and earned a percentage from the revenue generated by VIP services. Friends also told investigators about a man named Paul, an employee at the nightclub where Karina worked. They said he had made unwanted advances toward her and would become aggressive when she rejected him. At one point, they believed he might even have been stalking her. However, police later ruled him out as a suspect after confirming that he was at work at the time of the murder. And the more investigators looked into the case, the more it started to seem like this might have been a random killing carried out by a stranger.
We are still in the process of crime scene collecting evidence right now. We will be out there for several days. That is a remote area. We have crime scenes set up there, and we plan to chop down just about every weed in that location until we satisfied that we got all the evidence. Now, we have a lot of forensic evidence acquired so far, but we're not getting a lot of Crime Stopper tips. We have 3, and they're all pretty generic. So we have since raised the reward up for $10,000 for any information. That is a very strong community. I'll be out there as soon as I leave here. We've got nothing but support from everybody out there. We hope to have more information. Now, this is a remote area. Young lady was running, still daylight, so hoping somebody saw something going into the park. Thus far, we don't have a lot of leads on this right now, but we're still collecting evidence. The evidence that we've collected thus far is in the Office of Chief Medical Examiner. We're hoping to get it up on a DNA profile in the next couple of days. We have them, I tell you, we have them often in this city. No one is this subject of murder. They're usually late at night. If we have them on the street, rape 1, where stranger rapes are down in this city, nonetheless, we still get them. This type of incident where you have a jogger in a park, in a recreational center, in daylight hours is extraordinarily unusual.
About 400 people came to Karina Vetrano's funeral. Among them were several members of the New York City Fire Department. She was full of life, Phil said during his farewell speech. She lived every single day like it was her last, putting as much life as she could into every minute. In just 30 short years, she accomplished more than some people do in an entire lifetime. And we weren't just father and daughter. We were, like, one and the same.
She was a beautiful girl, young. I didn't know her. Didn't know her at all. But it's sad.
I'm going to address the coward.
Whoever killed her daughter, Karina. For the first time since the brutal murder, the Vetranos spoke with reporters outside of their home.
You know that my daughter was a force to be reckoned with. And I guarantee you that you will be reckoning with that force, not only for the rest of your pathetic life, but for the rest of eternity as you burn in hell. My daughter was a big believer of karma. And as you could see, she's magical. The whole world knows she's magical. And I guarantee you, you will pay forever.
Justice will be served, okay? That's why we have the PD. That's why we have God. Justice will be served.
Investigators were not able to recover usable DNA from the sexual assault evidence kit. However, they did manage to build a DNA profile using material found under Karina's fingernails, as well as on her cell phone, which was discovered just a few feet from her body. Her murder deeply shook the tight-knit community, and many people were living in fear, trying to understand what had happened. Thousands of people also donated money to a reward fund for information that could help identify the killer. Police contributed $25,000, the mayor's office added another $10,000, and the remaining funds were raised through GoFundMe.
They're tracking everything down. But what we need for someone to say, hello, I know the guy. That's what we're looking for. If I wake up and there's nothing for me to do, that's when the bottom's going to drop out. So I have to stay involved every day in every way. Today it's this. This is keeping me alive today.
A tractor with an industrial mower was brought to the crime scene, along with dozens of police officers from different units. Because the land where Karina's body was found was under federal ownership, the New York City Police Department asked the FBI for assistance. Federal agents supported the investigation by providing additional resources. They even used drones to survey the area from above. Police also said they checked a homeless encampment located more than 1 mile from the crime scene, but investigators eventually concluded it was likely not connected to the murder. They also questioned registered sex offenders who lived nearby, along with several people known to spend time living inside the park itself. To increase the resources dedicated to the investigation, the NYPD created a special task force. It included 2 detectives from each of the 8 units of Queens South. At the same time, officials had to address safety concerns inside the park. A federal officer explained that the large area where Karina was killed was only monitored around the perimeter, and even those checks were irregular throughout the day. The same officers were responsible for patrolling parts of Gateway National Park in Brooklyn and Queens, which also includes Spring Creek. This is a serious challenge for us. We've talked about it with the community before, and honestly, it's no secret, said the commander of the U.S. Park Police District. Investigators said that with no eyewitnesses, their most important lead was the DNA profile. That profile had already been checked, but at that moment it still hadn't produced a match in the national database. The CODIS database that we use for DNA was only created in 1998, so this person could have been in prison before that, explained Chief of Detectives Boyce. But it could also be someone younger, someone who's never been in prison at all. In a case like this, it was crucial to check whether anything similar had happened before. Early in the investigation, detectives in New York said they had been contacted by the Massachusetts State Police to see if there might be a connection between Karina's murder and the killing of Vanessa Marcotte, a 27-year-old Google account manager who was found dead in Princeton on August 7th. At the time, Vanessa lived in New York City, but she had traveled to Princeton to visit her mother. On August 7th, she went out for a run and never came back home. Later, her body was discovered in a wooded area about half a mile from her mother's house. Authorities in New York said they could not confirm any connection between the 2 cases. Still, they emphasized that investigators would continue checking every possible lead. Chief of Detectives Boyce said investigators still believe Karina's murder was random. Their main theory hadn't changed. They believed the suspect escaped through the dense brush surrounding the crime scene and eventually made his way toward Belt Parkway. Police examined every possible escape route, but surveillance cameras did not capture any clear image of a suspect. Every house near the park was checked, and residents were interviewed. Investigators even used the phrase, "a needle in a haystack," and honestly, that's exactly what the search felt like. As the high-profile case continued to draw more public attention, a Verizon employee who had been working in Spring Creek Park on the day Karina was killed contacted the police. He told detectives that he had seen a man who seemed suspicious. The man was wearing a wool cap and was in the area around the same time investigators believed the attack had happened. Based on that description, a composite sketch was created and released to the public on August 31st.
At a press conference, Chief Boyce says one particular thing stands out.
And if you'll notice the dark wool hat, remember the day was August 2nd. It's a little unusual he's wearing a wool hat. in the area there.
And now a laser-sharp focus on this bike path where, unfortunately, there are no cameras. And finding this man, who police say is black, 5'10", between 35 and 45 years old, with a medium build.
We have to speak to this person, so that's the only reason we're putting it out.
After the composite sketch was released, a former NYPD supervisor contacted Robert Boyce. At the time, he was working as the head of security at a residential building in Brooklyn, and he said that one of the residents looked a lot like the man in the sketch. Police went to the apartment. The man, whose name was Kevin, refused to open the door at first. Officers stayed outside the building until he eventually came out. Kevin admitted that, yeah, there was some resemblance to the sketch, so he was taken to the station for questioning. Once there, he refused to provide a DNA sample. Detective Barry Brown later said that decision immediately caught everyone's attention in the room. Police eventually obtained his DNA using a discarded water bottle he had thrown away. But when the results came back, the analysis showed that Kevin's DNA did not match the profile connected to the crime scene. After that lead was ruled out, investigators were basically back at square one. Hoping to generate new information, Crime Watch Daily released surveillance footage showing Karina just a few hours before her murder. The video was recorded during what police described as her usual running route. Her family and investigators were both hoping it might reveal some kind of clue. Authorities said it was the last known image of Karina. Karina's loved ones also came together to retrace some of the last routes she was known to have taken. When the DNA still didn't match anyone in the database, Phil urged investigators to use a method called familial searching, basically checking whether any relatives of the possible killer might already be in the database. You could find the killer, he said. You might be able to trace a direct connection, and that would narrow the search down a lot. At the time, that kind of testing method was being used in 9 states, but not in New York. So Phil started a petition, hoping to change that.
Familial DNA searching goes deeper, using special software to look for a similar, not exact match, indicating the suspect could be related to someone in the system.
There's untold amount of cold cases that'll be solved by this.
But the ACLU is pushing back, saying that such policy could lead to, quote, miscarriages of justice.
Well, I think they're just ignorant of the facts that we are just targeting criminals.
6 months after she was found dead, police now have a person of interest in the case of murdered jogger Karina Vetrano.
One man was taken into custody. The next day, he was officially arrested and he said, "Please tell my mom I'm sorry. Could I speak with someone from the victim's family? I'm sorry for what I did." The events that led to that moment actually began about a month earlier, after weeks and months had passed without any major breakthroughs in the investigation. In January 2017, Lieutenant John Russo took another look at the case. He was one of the officers who had been at the scene when Karina was found, and he also lived in Howard Beach. While reviewing the case files, Russo suddenly remembered an incident from May 2016, just a few months before Karina's murder. And, he started to wonder if it might actually be connected to the investigation. On the other side of the street, near the house next door, I saw someone walking away from me. The person was wearing a tracksuit with long sleeves and a hood pulled over their head, even though it was about 80 degrees outside. And I remember thinking, that's strange. Russo said the man seemed to be looking over the houses nearby, and that made him call the police. But by the time officers arrived, the person was already gone. The very next day, neighbors reported similar suspicious behavior. They said a man wearing a black and white tracksuit had walked onto several private properties. Later, Russo ran into the same man again and asked for his name. His name was Chanel Lewis. At the time, Russo figured that was probably the end of it and that their paths would never cross again. But in January, the memory came back to him. He had this strong feeling about it, like something just didn't sit right. So he started digging deeper into Chanel Lewis. He discovered that Lewis didn't have a criminal record, but he had received several summonses connected to the Brooklyn side of Spring Creek Park, across from the section of the preserve located in Queens. After that, Chief Boyce received a call from Russo. There was something in Lieutenant Russo's voice that made me think, this might actually be the one, Boyce said, so we jumped on it right away. When investigators began speaking with Chanel Lewis, he told officers he knew the area very well. According to him, he was mostly a loner with very few friends, and he often walked along the trails to listen to music and clear his head. While cooperating with detectives, he voluntarily provided a DNA sample. Officers also visited his former high school and discovered that his past appeared to be troubled and complicated. According to news reports, while he was still in school, he once told a teacher's aide that he wanted to stab his female classmates. "I want to stab all the girls." According to reports, he said that on May 17, 2011, when he was 15 years old. Sources also said that at one point he allegedly asked, "What would happen if I brought a knife to school?" Sources said the school notified the police, and he was taken into custody as a person with emotional disturbances. He was transported to Kings County Hospital Center for evaluation and later released. The following month, according to reports, school staff contacted law enforcement again after he allegedly cursed at a female student and threatened her and her family. He was once again taken to the hospital and later released. One tabloid article also claimed that he had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but that information appears never to have been independently confirmed. During research into the case, that claim only appeared in an article from the New York Post. In September 2011, he was reportedly transferred to a private school for students with emotional and behavioral difficulties. Former classmates later said he was known as a loner and was often bullied at school. "They used to beat him all the time," one student said. "Even girls would pick on him and hit him. He didn't have any friends." Another former student said that sometimes he tried to fight back, but that didn't happen very often. One classmate who rode the school bus with him said many people made fun of him because of the way he dressed and the way he looked. At the same time, several former students said they never knew him as an aggressive or confrontational person. "He always walked around school with his hood pulled over his head," one of them said. The executive director of Martin de Porres Schools later said that Chanel Lewis graduated in August 2015, and during his time there were no reports that he had threatened anyone. While he was at the school, there were no disciplinary records connected to him, and there were no other reports of threatening statements directed at other students, the director said in a statement. Chanel's father stood up for his son, but at the same time he pointed investigators to one important detail. He told detectives that his son couldn't have committed the crime because the day after the murder he had taken him to the hospital. Chanel was treated there for a hand injury. He said he had gotten it during a fight. After checking local hospitals, detectives managed to find the doctor who had treated him. According to Detective Barry Brown, the doctor said he had removed a foreign object from Chanel's hand. The DNA sample taken from Chanel's voluntary swab was then run through the system, and it matched the DNA found at the scene of Karina's murder. That foreign object removed from Chanel's hand was now believed to be a fragment of Karina's broken tooth, which had snapped off when she bit him.
I'm Detective Deal. You're located at the 107 Precinct, second floor, Detective Squad area. Today's date is February 5th, 2017. Time is approximately 10:33 a.m. And I'm activating the tape this time.
Now that I've advised you of your rights, are you willing to answer questions?
Okay.
Yes? Okay. All right. All right. Chanel, why don't we start with, I think it was a Tuesday evening on August 2nd, 2016. Do you remember that date and that evening?
Mm-hmm.
All right. And where were you at that time?
I was in at the Gateway and Spring Creek Mall.
Okay, by Gateway and Spring Creek Mall?
Spring Creek Park.
Park?
Yeah.
All right. Were you inside the park?
Yeah.
Okay. And was anyone with you, or were you by yourself?
By myself.
All right. About what time did you get to the park?
About 5 o'clock.
And were you on a trail or you in the grass?
On a trail.
Okay. Now, while you were in the park, did something happen?
Yes.
What happened while you were in the park?
On the park, there was this girl jogging, and then one thing led to another because some other situation.
All right. Well, the girl that was jogging, was she by herself or with anybody else?
By herself.
And when you first saw her, where were you? Were you in the grass or were you on the trail?
On the trail.
All right. And were you moving or were you standing still?
Like I was moving, listening to music.
You were walking or jogging?
Walking.
Walking? And you were walking towards her?
I was walking towards and then got side to side and then one thing led to another.
You said as she got next to you, when she got next to you as she was running and you were walking, what happened then?
And then So because of a past situation, I got angry and then started hitting her and stuff like that.
Okay. Before you did, where did you hit her?
Like in the face and like in the mouth.
In the face and the mouth. Before you hit her, did you grab her or did you just hit her right away?
Like kind of grabbed her first.
Grabbed her? And like, how did you grab her? What part of her body did you grab?
Like I started hitting her because of the incident that was going on earlier.
Right, but did you grab her before you started hitting her, or was the first thing you did was to hit her? What was the first thing you did?
I grabbed her.
Okay. And how did you grab her?
Like this.
Okay. With both hands?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what part of her body did you grab? Do you remember? Her shoulders, her waist, her neck? Do you remember?
Probably like around here.
Okay, around the shoulders. Did she say anything at all? No. Did she scream?
No, because her tooth broke.
I'm sorry? Her tooth broke? Right. Were you covering her mouth at all? No? Okay. How long would you say you were hitting her for? About how long in time?
The whole thing was like about 5 minutes.
5 minutes, all right. How far off the path would you say you dragged her into the grass? Like how many feet about?
Probably about 10.
Okay. What was the status of her clothing? How was her clothing
Kind of
arranged?
like pulled off.
Pulled off?
Yeah.
Okay, what was pulled off?
Like her clothes.
Now, you said you did this because you had some anger, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you tell me about that anger?
Cause I used to live in a different address than I currently live at now.
Right.
And then sometimes there's this man that comes around there. He play like loud music and carry a lot of friends around there. I didn't like it because I feel unsafe and comfortable, and I like my place private and peaceful. And usually I just.
No, I know. Chanel, I know that. Like last night, you really didn't want to talk about this, right? Last night, but today it was okay. You wanted to talk about it, right? I know that you told Detective Brown you wanted to straighten your life out, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Detective Brown said to wait until you came in the room to talk about it. That's right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you did, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Chanel Lewis, who was 20 years old, was arrested and charged with second-degree murder.
He was held without bail.
Why'd you do it?
Chanel! We were hiding out for 6 months. Come out. Go this way, look this way, look this way. Look this way. Look this way, right here, sir.
After his arrest, Karina's family reached out to the public and asked for opinions on how the remaining money from the GoFundMe fund should be used. You all made donations, so you all deserve to have a voice, Phil wrote on the fundraising page. Later, Phil said he distributed nearly $300,000, including making a contribution to Archbishop Malloy High School to create a scholarship in Karina's honor. After that, Chanel Lewis was formally indicted by a grand jury on multiple charges. In total, there were 13 counts related to murder and sexual assault connected to the death of Karina Vetrano. He was facing the possibility of life in prison without parole. Lewis pleaded not guilty.
Tonight, Lewis's relatives say it's not possible.
To the family, I'm sorry for their loss, but they have the wrong person.
Richard Lewis is the suspect's father.
He's a wonderful young man. Wonderful young man.
My brother is a skinny, you saw him on the TV. He's a skinny guy who cannot kill such a strong girl because she's a strong person. He alone can never kill a person like that.
Today, I would like to thank all those who have reached out and give their support for me and my family. I love my son. I support my son. I raised my son to be a God-fearing man and to respect life. My son is friendly, God-fearing, and would not hurt anybody. My son has a mental health problem and needs help. He's not a criminal and needs mental resources. Please respect my family privacy. Please respect my family privacy in this matter and allow my son to get help in due process.
Karina's family spent a long time pushing for investigators to start using familial DNA searching in criminal cases. Then, In June 2017, the New York State Commission on Forensic Science agreed to allow that method to be used in investigations involving murder, rape, and certain other serious crimes. The decision was made despite objections from civil rights organizations, which argued that the practice could pull law-abiding people into criminal investigations simply because of their family connections. By the time the commission approved the policy, Chanel Lewis had already been arrested. So the decision didn't change anything for Karina's case, but it could affect future investigations. As mentioned earlier, investigators had also looked into a possible connection between Karina's murder and the killing of Vanessa Marcotte. Later, authorities determined that the two cases were not related. On April 15, 2017, officials announced that Angelo Colon Ortiz, who was 31 years old, had been arrested after DNA evidence linked him to Vanessa's case. He later pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and unarmed robbery, and on November 2, 2022, he was sentenced to life in prison. He will not be eligible for parole until 2067, when he will be 81 years old. November 2018.
It was packed inside of the courtroom, filled with family and friends on both sides. As you mentioned, it was also very emotional. Karina Vetrano's mother was inside of that courtroom. She held onto a cross most of the time, crying. Karina Vetrano's accused killer, Chanel Lewis, obviously in the courtroom. His mother was there as well, and she held onto a Bible, also in tears most of the time. Now, opening statements got underway. Defense attorneys with the Legal Aid Society representing Lewis told jurors today Lewis is innocent. They have serious doubts about the evidence, adding there are no witnesses, and Lewis was coerced into confessing, and people are rushing to judgment.
In his opening statement, Assistant District Attorney Brad Leventhal said, "They crossed paths by chance. She didn't provoke him. He saw her, and he killed her." Prosecutors said that Chanel didn't have a girlfriend, had very few social connections, and didn't have a job. They described him as someone who often carried a lot of anger. According to their theory, it was that anger that led to the attack, which they described as random. That day, he took out his anger on a beautiful young woman, a girl wearing a top, the prosecutor said. However, the defense pushed back against those claims. There won't be any eyewitnesses. No one is going to walk into this courtroom and say, "He did it," said defense attorney Jenny Chung. She also argued that the prosecution was trying to, force a square peg into a round hole. Chung questioned the police interrogation of her client as well, which lasted more than 10 hours. Procedures were shortened. The prosecution's evidence is incomplete, she said. The defense also claimed that the DNA evidence linking Chanel Lewis to the crime scene was unreliable. Attorney Robert Moeller argued that the crime scene had been compromised by multiple people, including Karina's father, and therefore could not be considered a fully reliable source of evidence. Lewis's lawyers also said the confession had been obtained improperly and should not have been used in court. According to them, he confessed only because he wanted to leave after waiting for hours. But the prosecution focused heavily on what he actually told police. He was angry, and he took that anger out on Karina Vetrano. Those are his own words. He is the man who strangled Karina Vetrano, the prosecutor said. The prosecution also emphasized what they described as strong DNA evidence. An expert witness testified that the DNA profile taken from material found under Karina's fingernails, on her neck, and on her cell phone matched Chanel's DNA profile. 2 NYPD detectives also testified about the detailed and extensive process used to collect evidence in the case. Some of the images shown during testimony were so disturbing that Karina's parents were visibly shaken. At times, they couldn't hold back their tears, and at one point, they even had to leave the courtroom.
Closing arguments on the emotional trial over the death of 30-year-old Karina Vetrano have now wrapped up. The prosecution painting the suspect, 22-year-old Chanel Lewis, as a frustrated, angry, and lonely young man who spotted Vetrano on an after-work jog at a park in Howard Beach and took out all his anger by taking her life.
He was mad, and he took out his anger, and he took out his frustrations on Karina, grabbing her, throwing her to the ground, beating her, and strangling her until she was dead.
But the defense argued that it was the police department that was frustrated with their 6-month-long investigation that had yet to find a suspect, that Lewis was singled out, and that detectives worked endlessly to fit evidence they had to build a case against him.
They never allowed the evidence to develop the theory. Rather, they just wanted the evidence to fit their theory.
The exhausting trial lasted 7 days. Soon, it was time for the jury to decide the fate of the case. After a long day of deliberations, the jurors spent more than an hour reviewing the second of the defendant's 2 recorded confessions. They also asked to have 74 pages of testimony from the prosecution's DNA expert read back to them. On top of that, the jury requested to look again at the autopsy photographs of Karina. After a day and a half of deliberations, 5 jurors said they could not return a guilty verdict beyond a reasonable doubt. That created what's known as a hung jury. The jurors sent a letter to the judge explaining that they could not overcome their disagreements and had already exhausted every option to reach a unanimous decision. After a full day of deliberations, we remain divided. It seems like we can't move forward anymore. We believe we've exhausted all possible options. Because of that deadlock, the judge declared a mistrial.
The parents of Karina Vetrano looking somber and stunned leaving the courtroom. Relatives in tears after the judge declared a mistrial, a ruling which sent shock through the courtroom.
Sir, Mr. Vetrano.
Just a moment.
Your comment.
Stunned silence from the family of Karina Vetrano moments after learning justice would be delayed.
Vetrano's family did not speak after the ruling. Lewis's legal team, however, did.
Jury is understanding that DNA is not all it. Confession is not all it. And there are issues in the case that, as you all see, it's much more complex.
Is this a win for you?
Yeah.
Well, it's not a conviction, so I guess that's a good thing, but closure would be a good thing too.
That decision meant the case would have to be tried all over again, which made the legal process drag on even longer. For Karina's family and loved ones, it meant continuing a painful ordeal. They would have to relive the details of the tragedy once again and go through another trial in their search for justice. Prosecutors didn't want to take any chances during the second trial, so they prepared new evidence. One of the key pieces was a detailed record of Chanel's internet searches leading up to his arrest. Among those searches were queries about indictments, plea deals, criminal prosecution, and news reports about Karina's murder. Then, in March 2019, the retrial began.
Karina Vetrano's father returned to the stand today in the retrial of the man accused of strangling her back in 2016.
At one point, Vetrano's father dropped to his knees in front of the jurors as he emotionally described finding his daughter's stiff, cold body in a nearby trail.
The defense once again insisted that their client was innocent, arguing that his earlier recorded confession had been obtained under pressure. His attorneys also claimed that if he had truly been the killer, his DNA would have been found all over the crime scene in much larger quantities. But the prosecution remained firm. Prosecutors emphasized that the defendant's DNA matched the evidence, and they also pointed to the recorded confessions in which he admitted that he killed her. Then, just 1 day before the jury was supposed to begin deliberations in the retrial, the defense attorneys received an anonymous letter. It was supposedly written by an NYPD officer who expressed concerns about the investigation. The letter included several allegations about the early stages of the case. Among other things, it claimed that during the first strategy meetings, NYPD Chief Michael Kemper repeatedly said police were looking for 2 strong white men from Howard Beach. Sonny Hostin, a senior legal correspondent for ABC News, reported that if the letter turned out to be genuine and the concerns described in it were accurate, it could potentially become grounds for an appeal. One of Lewis's attorneys said, "We received disturbing and credible information suggesting that the police withheld critically important details about other potential suspects, and that information was never shared with the defense." The defense also said it had become known that police approached Lewis to obtain a DNA sample as part of a large-scale sweep that, according to them, showed racial bias. During that operation, DNA samples were collected from more than 360 African-American men in Howard Beach and nearby areas of Brooklyn and Queens. In light of this new information, we plan to file a motion on Monday requesting a hearing regarding the prosecution's failure to disclose exculpatory evidence, as well as a separate hearing concerning unconstitutional racial profiling during this investigation, the attorneys said. In response, Sergeant Brendan Ryan said that the NYPD had conducted a thorough investigation into the murder. And as the prosecution presented by the Queens District Attorney shows, the evidence clearly demonstrates that Chanel Lewis is responsible for her death. He also noted that numerous court hearings and 2 criminal trials, which took place over more than 2 years, had already carefully examined the issues raised in the anonymous letter. According to him, the letter contained many false claims and inaccuracies. Assistant District Attorney Leventhal also said, "This anonymous letter contains no verifiable information. The person who wrote it is clearly trying to disrupt the trial."
This morning, the judge denied a request from the defense asking for a hearing on this.
After that, the case was handed over to the jury for deliberation. The importance of that moment was obvious. The first trial had already ended in a deadlock, with the jury unable to reach a verdict and the court declaring a mistrial. Neither side was treating the outcome with too much confidence or complacency. There was a lot at stake, not just for the prosecution and the defense, but also for Karina's family, who had already endured years of uncertainty. On April 1st, 2019, the verdict was finally announced. Inside the courtroom, everyone held their breath.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
Chanel Lewis was found guilty.
A very different response this time around from Vetrano's parents leaving the courtroom.
God, tell us what's going through your mind right now. Mr. Vetrano. Thank you, Jesus.
Keep moving on.
Say it again. Thank you, Jesus. Sir, your thoughts?
Jubilation.
You're not allowed to interview.
Justice.
I'm thanking those jurors for listening to the overwhelming evidence.
All the anger, all the years of pain, but mostly the anger was lifted and gone.
Lewis lifted his handcuffed hands in a farewell wave to his family and supporters as he was led off to jail. Some of those supporters today say they've followed the case very closely, and a family spokesperson says they question the verdict.
How does a young man walk into Howard Beach, murder a young lady that was physically fit, and walk out of Howard Beach without being seen on any camera from the Gateway Mall, any camera in Howard Beach at all?
After the guilty verdict was finally delivered, the case once again slipped into a state of uncertainty.
Now to a stunning development in the Karina Vetrano murder case. Sentencing for her convicted killer has been postponed because of new claims of juror misconduct.
His family, it was another painful blow, and a reminder that even a guilty verdict doesn't always bring an immediate or final sense of closure. It was claimed that one of the jurors accused 3 others of ignoring the judge's instructions about when and how the case was allowed to be discussed. The judge agreed to delay sentencing in order to hold a hearing with the jurors. Queens District Attorney Richard A. Brown later responded to the defense's accusations, presenting a different version of what had happened inside the jury room. In a sworn written statement referenced in the motion, Juror A claimed that Juror B had started expressing conclusions about the case from the very beginning of the trial and continued doing so throughout the proceedings. According to the statement, Juror B told Juror A, "I've already made up my mind, and I hope you have too." After the victim's parents testified on the second day of the trial, District Attorney Brown wrote that those comments from Juror B identified in the motion as the 4th juror did not show prior bias. Instead, he said they reflected an emotional reaction to the shocking testimony about the condition of the victim's body. During deliberations, jurors are required to rely only on the evidence presented in court. However, according to a sworn statement, some jurors began bringing up information that had never been introduced as evidence, and some of that information may not have been accurate. Juror D told the others that the absence of the defendant's DNA and samples from the victim's intimate area could be explained by the idea that the body might have absorbed the male DNA. She allegedly told Juror A,
"I know this better than you, you're just a man. I was raped."
She argued that by saying this, the juror had improperly supplemented the evidence presented in court with her own personal experience. Because of that, other jurors may have felt they couldn't question her statement and were forced to accept it as fact. That kind of communication was described as juror misconduct, since she had essentially become an unsworn expert supporting the prosecution. In other words, the jury had stepped beyond the evidence that was officially presented in court. Attorneys from the Legal Aid Society representing Chanel Lewis, Robert Moeller, Julia L. Burke, and Jenny Chung submitted these arguments to the court. However, Juror D denied ever telling the other jurors that she had been a victim of rape. In a sworn statement submitted along with the prosecution's response, she wrote,
"I've never been raped, and I have never told anyone that I was raped. As far as I know, during the deliberations, no other juror said that she had been raped either."
In another example mentioned in the motion, defense attorneys said that one of the jurors had drawn conclusions based on information that was never part of the evidence presented in court. Juror C compared injuries from a completely unrelated rape case with the injuries suffered by Karina Vetrano and claimed that sexual assault had been proven because the injuries in both cases were the same. The motion argued that the information Juror C shared with the other jurors was improper because it essentially introduced facts that had never been presented during the trial and went beyond a juror's ordinary life experience, knowledge, or common sense. Juror C admitted that he had mentioned his experience serving on a jury in a previous rape case. However, he said another juror immediately told him not to do that, and after that he stopped discussing any details from his earlier jury service. According to a sworn statement from one of the jurors, the district attorney defended the jury's actions. It was stated that none of the jurors presented themselves as professional experts. Instead, each person simply relied on their own life experience and expressed their personal opinion as an ordinary citizen. That wasn't misconduct.
After the verdict, CBS 2 spoke to the jury foreman who called it a slam dunk case. When asked what the most damning evidence was,
two things. The confession, it wasn't coerced. DNA was like so overwhelming.
He said the jury was unanimous on the murder charges, but there were at least 2 holdouts on the sex abuse charges.
However, in another interview after the verdict, one of the jurors who agreed to speak with reporters anonymously said he had felt pressure from other jurors to vote for a guilty verdict. In the end, the judge rejected the claims of juror misconduct. After that decision, the sentencing could finally move forward. April 23, 2019.
With respect to murder in the first degree, the sentence of this court is that you spend the rest of your natural life in jail without any possibility of parole.
It's the moment the family of Karina Vetrano has been waiting more than 2.5 years for, giving passionate testimonies in the courtroom ahead of sentencing for Chanel Lewis, the man who will now serve life in prison for her death.
There were no more Merry Christmases, no more Happy New Years, no more happy birthdays. There is no more pleasure in life, no more smiles, no more happiness. Those were all taken by that convicted, murdering rapist. Only my faith in God and my belief in heaven keeps me from killing myself for fear of not being allowed into heaven to see my baby again.
Describing his family walking the earth as zombies just waiting to see Karina, Phil Vetrano told 22-year-old Channel Lewis his daughter had a message for him.
She told me that if you stand up here today in court and ask for her forgiveness, tell her you're sorry, she will forgive you. But remember, those are not my words, and I will never forgive you.
Her mother brought a piece of Karina into the courtroom.
These are Karina's shoes. These are the shoes that she put on the morning of August 2nd as she prepared to work and wore throughout the workday. As tiny as they are, Your Honor, these are the shoes of a giant, a valiant warrior, and a queen.
At times, you could see Lewis over her shoulder.
The vacant expression you show is merely a reflection of your detached and empty soul. You suffered and died 1,000,000 deaths every second of every day. You breathed, you ate, you searched your phone for pornography and forcible rape. But God was watching you all the time, Chanel Lewis.
The judge added 32 years in prison to the life sentence for second-degree murder and sexual assault. This is a situation where both families have lost, he said. The worst nightmare any parent could imagine: your child goes out for a run and never comes back. One day, you'll see that the people who followed this case will move on with their lives, and you'll be left alone. But I'll tell you this, when that day comes, you'll be behind bars.
The defense spoke on behalf of Lewis, and then he said just a few words.
I'm innocent.
And I'm sorry for the family's loss, but I didn't do this.
Those who believe in his innocence argued that the NYPD was under intense pressure to quickly find a suspect and close the case, and that investigators focused on him because of that pressure. Around 40,000 people signed a petition calling for the case to be reviewed by the Conviction Integrity Unit. Despite the calls for his release and the ongoing public debate, the legal outcome did not change. After 2 trials, 1 mistrial, and years of reviews and disputes, the jury found him guilty and the court issued its final sentence. For the justice system, that verdict marked the formal end of the legal process. In a case filled with complexity and controversy, the conviction brought a legal conclusion even if it didn't bring emotional closure to a story that had consumed a family, a community, and public attention for years. Karina Vetrano's family says they want her to be remembered for more than just the circumstances of her death. Through scholarships, memorial initiatives, and community efforts, they are trying to keep her name and her story alive in the community she loved.
Something so tragic and despicable. We have something good coming out of this. We have a scholarship.
Amid all the legal battles, appeals, and public debates, one person often faded into the background: Karina Vetrano. Her life, not the legal fight that unfolded after her death, remained the true center of this story. And in the end, that's where this story returns. Karina Vetrano was a daughter, a friend, a young woman building her future, someone who worked with children and filled her days with routine, purpose, and plans. On an ordinary summer evening, she stepped out of her home to do something she had done countless times before. She went for a run, and she never came back. That simple, devastating reality became the heart of this case. How an ordinary moment can suddenly become irreversible, and how the loss of one life can leave a silence that a family, a community, and everyone who followed her story can feel for years.
A memorial as beautiful as Karina Vetrano, tucked away in Spring Creek Park, where a butterfly made of stones, an angel, and candles sit. But perhaps the most important fixture of all, her father, who returns here every morning to remember his daughter.
It's the only place I could go to get peace. And it might seem strange because right where I'm sitting is where I found her. But I think because it's the only place where I have any control.
If she could be here today, or you could speak to her today, what would you say to her?
I speak to her every day. Every single day I speak to her. And she speaks to us in volumes.
Karina's father says her voice will always be heard, from the sound of the birds here to the writings on her blog. And they plan to find a way to get her work put into a book. How do you think Karina would want to be remembered?
Just as she is. Just as everybody sees her. She's special, she was smart, she was beautiful, and she was destined for greater things. And she has achieved that. We don't know what the rest of our life is going to be like. But it's a good feeling to know that now we could move forward.